We'll call the Tuesday, October 4th, 2011 meeting of the Iredell County Board of Commissioners to order, and join us in prayer at this time, please. Heavenly Father, again, we come to you thanking you for all the blessings that are ours. We thank you for the right that we have for self-government. We thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to serve. We thank you for each one here and their interest in local government. We pray especially upon these scouts that are with us tonight, that you'll raise up these young men to serve others and, most importantly, to serve you. I pray that as we go through the items on this agenda, that we'll be an example to them, that kind of example that you would want us to be, that our sincerest motive would be to bring you glory and to serve the people of this county. We ask it in Christ's name. Amen. This evening we have Boy Scout Troop number 171, Williamson Chapel Methodist Church with us. We're honored to have these young men with us, and if they would come through the gate, we're going to let them lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
There you go. 3 rows of 5. Get it straight.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Folks, I'm going to beg your indulgence in advance here. I was cautioned by the scoutmaster this evening that these young men have some homework to do before they go to bed, so around 8 to 8:15 he's going to give me the high sign, and we're going to take just a minute to let them clear out before we advance to the next item on the agenda, so just be prepared for that if you would. Mr. Smith, are there any adjustments to the agenda coming from the staff this evening?
Mr. Chairman, we had some information come in at a very late date on memo number 12, and I would request that that be removed from the agenda.
Be removed? Yes, sir. Okay. Is that all you have, sir?
That's it.
Okay. Are there any adjustments, additions from any member of the board? Hearing none, the floor is open for adoption of this agenda as amended.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mitchell for adoption. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Under presentation of special recognitions and awards this evening, we're pleased to have Captain Stanley Watkins with the Iredell County Sheriff's Department with us this evening. And I believe Captain Phillips is with him. If you gentlemen want to come forth, we'll present you with this plaque for retirement. Okay. This time, we'll call the meeting in the public hearing in regard to case number 1109-1. It's the owner applicant Bob H. Stilp request to rezone property from RA Residential Agricultural to NB Neighborhood Business Zoning District. Property location is 911 Brawley School Road, Mooresville, North Carolina. And we have...
Mr. Johnson, we have an appointment before the board.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I overlooked that. Forgive me. I'll declare the meeting out of public hearing then. I'm sorry. We have Mr. Rick Christenberry desires to speak about a wood-burning boiler in his neighborhood that is a nuisance and health hazard. Mr. Christenberry, are you with us? Come forward if you would.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. This is my first time being here, so I'm just going to say that my name is Rick Christenberry, and I live in the Spring Shore Subdivision, which is kind of between, it's off of Pineville Road, which is off of East Mambo Road, and Buffalo Shoals Road. So it's a waterfront development for some people, and the rest of us live in the water access. So it's a subdevelopment. And my problem is that the neighbor behind me has got an outdoor wood burner. I don't know if anybody's familiar with those in too, but it's like what the EPA classifies it as an accessory structure designated.
Could you just stand a little closer to the microphone, please?
Sure thing, sir. Yeah. That the EPA designates this as an accessory structure designated and intended through the burning of wood for the purpose of heating the principal structure or any other site, building, or structure on the premise. What I'm here for is kind of to see if you guys have any rules, regulations, ordinance, or anything that you can help with into really. That before I came here, I guess I've spoken to a lot of different people, the North Carolina State, the EPA Commission into, and also NC Diener in Mooresville, and the Iredell County Health Department, and the Iredell County Zoning Department, and the Fire Department, and also with Mr. Gray Mills, the North Carolina representative, and then the Senator, Mr. James Forrester, and then also, I guess, Patrick McHenry. So I've tried to go up the food chain. Everybody says that what you need to do, since North Carolina does not have any laws, rules, or regulations of these outdoor wood-burning furnaces, that to go to your county commissioners and let them go ahead and think and try to set rules for these outdoor wood-burning furnaces. And I guess really what I'm really trying to do is figure out how to do this because my next door neighbor, I've lived in Spring Shores for 14 years, and then my neighbor moved in behind me, who has approximately 30 acres of land, and he put his wood-burning furnace 125 feet from my property line. So whenever you start the furnace, smoke just boils out of the furnace and just comes over, on my land and even into my house, really. So it's just becoming an extreme nuisance. This has been going on, I guess, for years and years and years, and we've tried to work it out with them. But it seems to them their only answer is it's just wood smoke. It won't hurt you. So I tried to previously give you guys some information on some of these outdoor wood burners, what they actually are. And the last thing that really got to me this last time was even watching the Panthers play last weekend. I'm sitting on my couch that I started coughing. And when you started coughing, I looked up and the smoke was coming from the unit across the yard, and it actually comes in, it penetrates through the house right there too. Even with your windows up, storm windows, caulking, it just really penetrates in through the house. You can't even sleep. I had to disconnect my smoke alarms in the house because they keep going off. And then you wake up in the middle of the night, then you realize it's not really the fire, it's just the smoke from the boiler coming into your yard and into your house. And I know they particularly have a right to burn wood, to do their own heating with this, because they use this to supplement their heat. It's like I an outdoor wood burner is like a fire. It burns, it's like a wood burning fire that heats water. Then water is pumped into the house, and they have a little evaporator on their furnace, which actually heats their house through that. And they use it for supplementally hot water. And they do have the same capability that we do, to pay Duke Power to hook up to the HVAC and also the water. But they just refuse to actually pay Duke Power anything to heat. They just really don't want to. And so we finally asked them, how much is this saving you a month? Like I said, $67 a month they're saving on their fuel bill like this, and really. So it's turned into a very much of a hardship for me and my wife and my family, and my wife and my daughter then. But I think my particular problem started in 2009, but last year in 2010, my allergist and my lung doctor said that I have allergy-induced asthma now due to, I guess, the years of the smoke building up then, that now my lungs function, but my airways to my lungs are so irritated you can't really get your breath into. You can walk from here to the front, then you actually get out of breath into. I haven't even been able to even mow your own yard or have a garden in your own yard, or come home from work, sit on the back porch, sit back, drink some iced tea or anything. You can't even do that. The smoke just comes over. You'll be sitting out there, and all of a sudden, all right, you got to get up, go inside, shut the doors, and then a little bit later on, it penetrates through the windows and the doors, so you can't really get rid of the smoke. And since North Carolina, no state laws, nobody's got any kind of rules or regulations for these particular wood burners. So I'm pretty much at your mercy to go ahead and see how do we do this. Like Senator Forrester's secretary called me today, so she's researching from her end to see if they can establish any kind of rules or laws, or if not, they were all very sympathetic to my calls that you can't even live in your own house. So they said, all right, we'll see if we can work something out. But first, you need to go to your county commissioners and see what they have to say, if they can do anything for you. But I think the actual nature of the beast, this particular unit into, is like a small building that sets outside your house. Once you heat it up, the water gets 150 degrees, the unit shuts down till the water gets cold in the house, and all of a sudden it'll cycle back on. So these cycles of on again, off again, on again, off again, kind of lets the fire to be oxygen starved. It never really gets its full maximum or combustion point. Like it never gets like 1,000 degrees or something like that, so it actually can burn the wood. So the wood starts up, the water gets hot, it shuts it down, so everything kind of turns to creosote or something. So when the fire starts, just a huge bellowing of smoke comes out of it then and floats over into your yard. And this can last anywhere from a half hour to an hour. And you just kind of get really, really frustrated that you can't even live in your own yard, in your own house. And we've talked to them many, many times. And the last time we spoke, they said, my attorney told me we're not breaking any laws. So if you really don't like it, you can move. And you go, well, I was here 14 years before you moved here. You have 30 acres, but you put your wood burner 120 foot from my property. It's 150 foot from my bedroom window. So it just, can you imagine never being able to open your bedroom windows, your front door, anything to let air in? You can't hang any clothes or anything on the line, because if you do, when you pick them up, you bring them in, it's got small tar drops on it where it just comes out, the creosote just falls back on it. But the major problem is that when it doesn't burn properly, there's real fine particles, like they call it the 2.5 microns of particles. It's called PMs. That can actually get into your lungs, and there's no way to get them out. It doesn't expel it too easily. And these articles act like gas, really, so they can actually penetrate through your house. Even I went out there and recaulked all my windows, everything. nothing seems to work. Absolutely nothing works. So I'm really trying to get some suggestions from you guys what you can do. If there's anything we can do, the EPA and other states from, like you say, Washington State, Oregon, Vermont, Maine, and New York, where they've had these things for a long time, have actually started making laws to prohibit them. Just cannot have them anywhere close to a residential, I guess, setting like that. And if you're a farmer out in North Iredell County where you're out there by yourself, that's fine, because you can light your smoke. It's not going to do anything. The smokestacks are only 10 feet off the ground, so as soon as it comes out of the smokestack, it just sort of just falls back down on the ground and rolls across the ground. So the EPA kind of came up with some basic suggestions, but there are no laws for it then, that they wanted you to have there's a new technology they call the phase 2 technology, which makes it burn 90% more effective. They call it the white tag. There's a white tag for that, means it burns 90%. The orange tag burns 70%. Then anything previously than like 1999 or 2000 will be, there is no regulation. They're just built like old wood burners is what they are. And then they say that the smokestack needs to be at least 3 to 5 foot taller than the building you're servicing. So if like your house, like your fireplace, make it 3 or 5 feet higher than that so that the wind can actually take it and disperse it somewhere. And then they recommend that even 500 to 1,000 feet from the closest property that's not right next to the actual unit itself. So you're 1,000 feet away from your closest neighbor then.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Pope a question?
Sure.
If and I'm just doing hypothetical. I'm not suggesting we do it. Let's just say we pass some ordinance that prohibited, limited, fill in the blank for the verb, these wood burning furnaces, wood burning supplemental heaters, however you want to classify them, in subdivisions. Even if we pass that, would it not be true that this current individual that owns and operates it would be grandfathered?
Probably.
Okay, so just so we can manage expectations here, you understand that no matter what we do, it would only apply to new construction, and which means you're stuck.
Well, so that means I can't even live in my own house. I can't even live in my own yard. They have rights to do this, but I personally have no rights at all. I don't even have a right to breathe. I'm not yelling at you, but I'm just stating the fact that.
I want you to understand what our limitations are here.
But you do have the right to go out there and actually inspect the unit if it's not running properly. If they don't raise their stack from 10 feet, raise that stack up to 25 feet or 20 feet. Let it disperse above the air. There are things that they can do to work on this that they can update their unit, pick it up from that spot, and move it to another side of the house. Just move it away.
What you just heard the attorney say was we can change all the rules in the world, but the property owner you're dealing with will be grandfathered and exempt. Mm-hmm. We can say to make the chimney taller, make it X number of feet from your property, his property, next house, whatever. What you're just hearing him saying is that we can, if we take this matter up, we might be able to prevent it from happening again to somebody else, but we can't fix your problem.
Well, the worst case scenario, if I could save anybody else from what I went through last year with my lungs, that would be well worth it to me, too. If I have to be the guinea pig to get it thrown out there for everybody in North Carolina, there's got to be somebody else in North Carolina that this has affected besides me and my family. But then that way I will have to deal with my neighbor then, too, to see what it is that we can fix this in, or actually ask them. I actually started to pay them for their power bill if you would just stop burning your unit. But then again, you start thinking, well, is that extortion? Is it something I will stop if you pay me so you can live in your own house? So you just see where I'm coming from. I see where you're coming from, that we can't stop this particular unit right now, but if I could stop anybody anywhere in the future from going through this problem, it would be well worth it there too. And they do have the rules and regulations established in other states and other EPAs. If we can just let you guys look at it and tweak it then, really. See, I'm out of time there too, so thanks a lot for your patience there then.
I feel some degree of sensitivity to what Mr. Christenberry's confronted with here. I guess we could ask Mr. Smith to instruct Mr. Roskowski, I got that right, our planning director, to see if there are any state laws that he's aware of, or if we would have the authority to regulate such activity, I suppose, and report back to us at a future meeting.
I will.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Christenberry, wherever you went. Okay. This time I will rightly call the meeting into a public hearing in regard to case number 1109-1, owner applicant Bob H. Stilp requests to rezone property from RA residential agricultural to NB neighborhood business zoning district, property location 911 Brawley School Road, Mooresville, North Carolina. Mr. Roskowski.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, good evening. Again, this is a request to rezone 1.21 acres at 911 Brawley School Road from residential agricultural to neighborhood business district. Currently, as you can see on this map, the property is being used for residential purposes. However, as is the case with many of the surrounding properties that you can see in that bluish-green shade to the east and to the southwest of the subject property, this area has been converting to retail and office uses, excuse me, in the past. Adjoining parcels to the west and east over the time have converted from this agricultural zoning, residential agricultural zoning, to this residential office zoning. Across the street that you see in that red hash color, that's the property within the town of Mooresville's planning jurisdiction, and it's actually zoned neighborhood mixed uses and allows high-density residential as well as retail services and professional offices. Therefore, the county zoning of neighborhood business closely mirrors the town of Mooresville zoning district across the street, which leads to similar development patterns through this corridor. On the next map, this is the future land use. As you can see, well, not on this map, but this property is actually located in between the town of Mooresville's short-range and long-range planning or urban service area boundaries, as well as this request is consistent with the 2030 Horizon Plan due to the designation of this section of Brawley School Road as a commercial corridor. The town of Mooresville planning staff did review this request, and their one comment back to us was that development under their regulations would require that parking be in the rear of the structure. Our regulations actually require that 60% of the parking be at the side and rear of the structure. Given that this property extends southward in a pie shape, it does in fact adjoin other properties that are zoned residential and currently being used as residential. However, given that pie shape and our requirements for screening and buffering, that rear portion of the subject property is going to be very limited to development for retail and office, just because of the shape of the property, as well as all of the other regulations with screening and buffering that would be applied. And lastly, this property is located along the stretch of Brawley School Road that has recently been widened and received a properly constructed driveway cut as part of this NCDOT project. And very briefly, these are the views northeast on Brawley School Road. This is a view of the property that is adjacent to the northeast. This is a view of the subject property, and towards the rear you can see that accessory building that is part of that pie shape. This is a view of the property to the southwest. Again, southwest on Brawley School Road. And then this is the view across from Brawley School Road. And again, across, you can see there's high-density residential. Planning staff is of the opinion that the permitted uses in the neighborhood business district as applied to this lot should not have a negative impact on the surrounding properties given the limited scale that the development would be permitted on this lot. On September 7th, the planning board voted unanimously to recommend approval of this request based upon consistency with the 2030 Horizon Plan. Be glad to answer any questions you might have of us.
Any questions for Mr. Roskowski?
It is not inside the city limits of Mooresville, is that correct?
That is
It's
correct.
just outside of the city limits.
And actually, that is correct. Yes, just wanted to verify.
You know if they'll be trying to obtain any utilities from Mooresville, such as water and sewer?
I'd have to ask Rebecca Harper if she is not at this time, sir.
So they probably won't be annexed anytime soon.
Not that we're aware of.
Okay, any other questions? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in regard to this matter? Yes, sir. Come forward and state your name, if you would, please, sir.
I'm the owner, Bob Stilp. Good evening, Commissioners. I just didn't know if you had any questions for me. They kind of went over everything, and I've owned the property about 15 years.
Okay. Is there any questions, Mr. Steele?
Yeah, you're wanting it rezoned. Is there someone interested in the property for a specific purpose, and that's what's driving this rezoning?
I've had several inquiries on it, and the zoning is a big question, and I bring up that everything's been rezoned around me and across the road, but I've moved out of the immediate area, and I'm not using it like I did for years, and I think it would help on marketing it.
What kind of uses are they looking at right now?
They really didn't get that specific, just asking what the zoning was.
All right, fine, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Steele? I guess not. Thank you, sir.
Sure, appreciate it.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If not, we'll call the public hearing closed, and the floor is open for a discussion or a motion at your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we grant the request to zone it from residential agricultural district to neighborhood business.
Okay. Motion from Mr. Mitchell for approval. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, we'll declare the meeting to be in a public hearing in regard to consideration of a proposed amendment to the Iredell County Land Development Code, Distributed Antenna Systems, Chapter 3, R64, Chapter 2, Section 2.21.5, and Chapter 16, Section 16.4, submitted by ATC Outdoor DOS LLC. Mr. Roskowski, I believe that's you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will try to be as brief as I can over a fairly complicated issue, but again, I'll try to be brief. I'm going to leave this picture up because this actually shows examples of what we are discussing tonight. And essentially, you see telephone pole-like structures that are either inside a right-of-way or outside of a right-of-way and either connected with a public utility, or they may be their individual pole in a residential neighborhood on private property. But this is essentially what we are discussing tonight. There are also other accessory structures, such as hubs that look like small sheds, things of that nature that will go along with this as accessory structures. This has a lot of history to it, dating back to nearly over a year ago, and I can assure you that from my 1 month here, it appears that planning staff has worked very diligently over this period to attempt to address concerns that the public had, that ATC has had, as well as staff. And not sure if you completely understand what a distributed antenna system is, but basically it's a network of these separate poles that have antennas on top, and they actually are forming a network that then provides better communication services for areas. And typically these areas are very urban areas. This particular area of Iredell County, of course, is the Brawley School Road Peninsula area, from what I understand, and it has very dense development. It's not necessarily urban-like, but it is very dense residential development. And in order to provide better services to this area, ATC is looking at trying to install these systems. These type of systems are sometimes erected on existing infrastructure, such as the power pole, utility line poles, which are in the rights-of-way owned by the state or a public utility provider. They are also sometimes erected on private property through agreements negotiated between the company and the private landowner. Tonight, what I want to emphasize to you is that we acknowledge as staff that this technology will likely be more prevalent in the higher density areas, and this technology is considered a necessity due to the way technological advancements are taking place within this industry. At staff level, we wanted to create a situation where the poles do not look out of character necessarily with comparison with similar facilities such as telephone utility poles, while also allowing these systems to operate functionally. Distributed antenna systems should, in theory, decrease the need for additional new future large, tall cell towers. To date, across all of our zoning districts, we have not required any special use permit processes for telephone or utility poles serving similar functions inside or outside of rights-of-ways. Furthermore, in our current ordinance, most cell towers under 250 feet in height are not required to go through the special use permit process. In our opinion, the impacts on communities is less for poles than it is for large, tall cell towers. And finally, we keep in mind the guidance provided to us by our county attorney's office, which was essentially to apply some regulation without going overboard. The planning board did a very thorough job of exploring this issue, and I believe there was some agreement in regard to height and setback and concealment standards. Where some disagreement was whether or not to require a special use permit process for this. Ultimately, at the last planning board meeting, which was the third meeting at which this was discussed, the planning board asked American Tower Corporation whether or not they would approve of a special use permit process, and they said no, and they wanted to move forward with the text amendment as it was presented at the last planning board meeting. Therefore, we're before you tonight to essentially review this request, and it's somewhat detailed. I believe Land Tower Corporation may review this with you as well, but essentially we've put in place regulations that regulate the height and the setbacks of these structures, but also realize that with proper concealment standards, we can also allow some flexibility in the height and the setback standards. So that's essentially what this text amendment does. And we did not attach a special use permit process to this. And there are also, if you do choose to move forward with this text amendment tonight, there are also a couple of minor changes that we need to make to some other portions of the Land Development Code, and I'll be glad to review those in more detail at the appropriate time. So with that, I will pause and ask if you have any questions of me at this point.
Are there any questions of Mr. Roskowski?
Is ATC a public works utility? Are they defined under that as a public work utility?
Was actually not part of that process of determining that. If I could seek some guidance from Rebecca or the manager. Actually, if you want.
They have been declared a public utility by the North Carolina Utilities Commission, so they are a public utility in the state's eyes.
And with that being that they have been deemed a public utility, do they not have the right under state guidelines to place these without our consent?
And that is where our conversations with the county attorney's office took place, and that was the feedback we received, is that we believe we can put some standards, life safety standards in place, such as setback and height limitations, but again, not going overboard with cumbersome special use permit processes, things of that nature. That might be pushing the envelope somewhat.
Mr. Go ahead.
Can I ask Mr. Pope a question? Or you want us to wait till the end?
That's fine. It's your pleasure.
If I see that there's a gray area, and I always hate asking lawyers gray area questions because they use words like depends and maybe and stuff. If it's a straight utility, they get to put up the poles. But according to what we read in our brief, you believe that they don't have that unlimited authority because of the fact that they can go outside of the right-of-way. Can you add a little explanation to your opinion, please?
I think I can. I have here with me tonight one of the lawyers in our firm, Martha Peed, who has actually some expertise in this. And if you ask real hard questions, I'm going to defer to her. Okay. We don't believe that just because you are a public utility, you're exempt from all zoning regulations. We further believe that there's a specific state statute that allows counties to regulate these wireless structures. The statute, I don't have that statute right in front of me, but as I recall, it specifically says that counties may regulate them. Does that answer your question?
Well, the other part is I understand that if there's a right-of-way, that they have access to it. What I don't understand is how they have access if it's not the right-of-way.
Well, they can acquire an easement for purposes of installation of their structures either by a grant from the property owner or by a grant from the state. The state can give what's called an encroachment agreement, in which the state allows certain people, usually public utilities or quasi-public utilities, to encroach on the state right-of-way for certain defined purposes.
But here we're talking about them actually being able to go and put it on private property owners'
Not
land.
without the private property owner's consent.
So if they don't consent, they can't. A pole can't go on a property owner's land without their consent.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
How many structures are in question?
14
14 or 4?
I believe 14, and 10 are in the right-of-way. Staff shares
So it's
with
only
me.
4 that need different placement?
Outside of the right-of-way.
Outside of the right-of-way.
But just to clarify, these proposed regulations look at both inside and outside of the right-of-way as far as height and concealment.
And you feel we have the legal authority to place regulations on a public utility inside the right-of-way?
I do.
Okay.
I think the Utilities Commission could preempt our authority, but they haven't done that.
Okay. Any other questions?
How did you come up with the figure for this for the setback?
It's actually the same formula that we use for the cell towers. It's 1 foot for each foot of height in the tower.
This is, Ms. Harper, this is the thing that stuck out in my mind. I know that cell towers are so designed so that if they fail, for the most part, they fall straight down. These things could be erected on a one-piece pole, and that was a concern to me as I read the text, that a one-for-one ratio caused me some concern, quite honestly, that well, if you say it can be 60 feet tall and it must be 60 feet from a residence, well, you got some degree of comfort that it won't strike a home. It could fall in someone's yard and remain there for days and prohibit him from the use of his property or mowing his lawn or causing some degree of inconvenience. And that was a concern I had as far as the text. But you feel comfortable with your 1-to-1 ratio? Yes.
I think as a staff we did.
I think as a staff we did, from the standpoint of, that's essentially, as I understand, what we're applying to other like uses. Mm-hmm. We could certainly, if that turns out to be an utmost concern to the board tonight, we could certainly look at that at staff level.
Well, I came here prepared this evening that if we do adopt this text amendment, to amend that to increase that a little bit.
Sure. Yes, sir.
I'm going to wait and hear from everybody before I settle on a number, but that was a concern reading the text that I had.
Yes, sir.
We've got our scouts here tonight, and I know one of the points of the scout law is to be courteous. Sometimes people say I sound rude when I ask questions, so I'm trying to be courteous. But I do have to ask a question because Duke Power, it said that Duke Power does have some utility poles, but they did not allow this company to use those poles. So they want to put up their own poles. Okay? Now, let me exaggerate something to make a point and pose the question. Okay, Duke Power says, we paid for the poles. You're not going to just get to use them, or we're not going to even let you rent the space, whatever. So this company, they put up 14 poles. And then, Virgin Mobile or, Joe Blow cell phone company comes in and they say, well, we want to use the 14 poles you put up. And they go, well, heck no, man, you're our competition. So now all of a sudden, now they need to do the same thing using our ordinance. So now they want to put in 14 more poles. And then here comes Verizon. They go, well, you know what? We don't quite have the same signal that they do now, so we want to put up 14 poles. How does this end without dozens of poles? I mean, the way we keep that happening with the electric company is you can only buy your electricity from one provider, and he's got to send his electrons through the same set of wires. With the wireless, we don't restrict people, and I'm glad that we don't, to only using one wireless provider in their neighborhood. So how are we going to keep this from getting out of hand?
Well, certainly I believe American Tower Corporation can speak directly to their marketing, but I believe I read, and I'm going to have to ask them to address this in their presentation, but I believe I read in the documents that they are building this system with the intent of co-location for carriers.
But the person who said that could get fired tomorrow, and the new guy could come in and he says something different, but we're stuck with what we've put in writing. So my question to you is, based upon not what they say that their intent is or their corporate policy is, but based upon the way our ordinance is written, what keeps a company from coming in the day after we pass this, and we have 3 different companies that each of them want to put in 14 poles at the point?
Sure. And I'm not sure if at staff level we discussed that particular point, Rebecca, to you. And so you bring up a very valid concern that we could certainly research further. I do not have an answer for you.
Okay. That's a biggie.
Okay.
That's a biggie. Okay. All right.
Mr. Johnson, may I chime in on that?
Yes, sir.
I do have some experience in this because it has been going on for so long. And we did talk about that to some degree without getting good resolution, because when we're dealing with these 14 poles as a unit, basically. Without one, they have to compensate in another way, being another pole somewhere else or a higher pole or something of that sort. And basically came to the resolution that it was almost going to be impossible for us to say they'd have to be set back from each, poles would have to be set back from each other, be it Verizon or Virgin or whomever. That was just something that we probably could not address, or we just did not have any knowledge in which to do so. So to try and answer your question.
So what's the answer? I don't.
Well, I don't know that we could reasonably, without coming up with an arbitrary solution, I don't know that we could reasonably do it. That was the consensus.
That we couldn't reasonably restrict it to just one set of 14 poles, or?
Yes. We couldn't just leave it at this one and go our merry way. We would have to provide for some competition, and that basically let the free market decide where they were going to be. Also with the input from NCDOT, because they do control the rights of way in most of these cases.
Okay. Mr. Smith, these are going on private property, so the property owner does have the right to say no.
Yes.
To another company coming in. Is that correct?
Largely, this would be a bigger issue in the right of way.
In the right of way, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're exactly right.
Okay. Perhaps someone who will speak to us will have more knowledge in regard to this than we do collectively.
Well, I'm a little leery about how much regulation we put on something that is a public utility, because my concern is overstepping our state law. That's just a concern that I have, that we don't get into an area that we don't have the authority to regulate. That's just because they are a public utility, and the property owner has the right to say no.
Okay. Any other questions from Mr. Roskowski? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll talk.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in regard to this matter? Okay. How many folks do we have here who wish to speak? Okay.
I believe just two on behalf.
I think we probably got a couple over here in opposition. Okay. So I just, we got maybe at most a half a dozen, so we're just going to proceed based on good manners at this point. And
a procedural note, Commissioner. Will there be time for rebuttal allowed to the applicant?
I will afford you opportunity to respond to questions. This is a public hearing where questions will be answered and responded to. I'm a little leery of the term rebuttal. We're not going to get into a debate here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
May I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
State your name, please.
My name is Sean Phelan, and I represent ATC Outdoor DAS. We're here tonight to request approval of the DAS text amendment to the Iredell County Land Development Code. As Joey, because I can't pronounce his last name, stated earlier, DAS is a new technology, and we think it really benefits the community by allowing wireless development in areas that, for technological reasons or aesthetic reasons, the full-blown 200-foot wireless tower doesn't make sense. We believe that the code as written currently does not address DAS technology, because we're dealing with poles that are no taller than 50 or 60 feet. The ones planned for Iredell County, I think, are 45 feet, and that includes their antenna. And we believe that with the current ordinance that's in place requires things like an 8-foot fence around the tower and requires 500-foot separation from residential structures. And that just doesn't make sense with the DAS build-out. The DAS is pretty much a utility pole, and on it are erected antennas, and they're connected to one another in the hub by optic fiber that is usually buried or run with other utility lines. I'd also like to point out that this text amendment is supported by staff and also the Point Homeowners Association that approved it unanimously. So we've been working with the Point on the text amendment. If I may, I'll walk you through the exact language of the proposed text amendment. Section 1 deals with the facilities in the right-of-way, and in the right-of-way, the state right-of-way, we're required to have a North Carolina DOT permit, and the DAS structure cannot exceed 50 feet. In areas that have no above-ground utilities, DAS is required to be concealed as much as possible to the extent it can be, and to the approval of the zoning administrator. Section 2 deals with DAS on private property, and that has a little more restrictions. As you see, it's got to be 1 foot away from a residential structure for every 1 foot in height of the pole, and it's got to be 30 feet from the property line. Now, these setbacks can be removed in order to allow the planning staff to work with the parties to move the pole to the side of the property or into existing vegetation to allow them to be less visible to the public. Section 3 requires that any DAS cable be run along with other utility cables to avoid clutter. The next section requires that any hub or other accessory or component buildings meet the setback requirements in the area in which they're located. And then the last section requires that the zoning administrator review the application and determine that it complies with the ordinance. So that is the exact language of the text amendment that we've requested. I believe there are 2 questions that came up earlier I would like to address quickly. One is dealing with the poles falling and how the towers are built. These that are going to be put up are essentially utility poles. Duke Power and other utilities locally use what's called a Class 4 pole. The ones that will be put up here are Class 3, which means it's a stronger pole and can withstand more in terms of storms. Someone else, I think, also asked about co-location. The poles are designed for co-location, and if the commissioners wish that provision be added, we're certainly amenable to that in terms of the text amendment. And we believe that this ordinance or this text amendment strikes the balance between over-regulating the industry and also protecting the citizens of Iredell County. It's been through a lot. We've worked hard at it along with the planning staff and the neighborhood association out at the Point, and we request that the commissioners adopt it. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Why didn't Duke Power let you locate your antenna on top of any of their poles?
I am not a technical wizard, but my understanding is that Duke Power has certain levels of power lines, and the ones that I guess go down Brawley School Road are too high voltage, so that's the reason. their safety concerns.
All right. Which wireless system is wanting y'all to put this antenna system up?
AT&T.
Why isn't Verizon asking you?
I really can't answer that. I think a lot depends on how their systems are built out. I have no idea what their footprint is.
Where do they have their antenna? They must not have a problem. Where's their antenna that covers the point?
I really can't answer that. I do have Carmen Rajamani from ATC Outdoor DAS, and I think she does have some knowledge about it.
Okay.
Good evening. To answer your question, that Verizon has inquired about our network, that just as a company, they historically are not the first actors on DAS networks. They prefer that it be built, and then they can look at the node locations and pick the ones that meet their coverage. But they have inquired from us about utilizing the system once it is built. And I'm sorry, did you have a second question? Oh, I think about Duke Power. Let me just clarify Sean's comments. That for our equipment, as you see in the diagram there, that we require what's called a pole top installation for the antenna. That Duke has their own standards, that they allow us to install our equipment pole top on secondary power poles, but not on primary. That's something within their own standards. And we have installed on Duke Power poles in other parts of the area, but they will not allow us because the poles that we identified in the right-of-way are primary poles.
Okay.
Did you say that you had the approval of the Point Homeowners Association?
From the HOA board, yes, for the placement of 2 nodes on HOA common property, and then we also have an agreement with the Point Golf Club to place 2 nodes on their property, on golf course property. Okay. Thank you.
Any other
Hold on a
questions?
second, I did have one other. Commissioner Johnson had inquired or expressed some concerns about the ratio for the setback from the pole to a property to a dwelling. And you said that instead of a Class 4 pole that Duke Power puts up, y'all would be putting in a Class 3. Is that your policy, or is that a requirement, or is this something that, I guess the lower the number, the better the pole?
The bigger the pole.
Yeah, the bigger the pole. So, what keeps your company from, a guy coming in and saying, we're going to cut cost and I'm going to put in a Class 6 pole?
Well, I think poles go up to Class 5, but I understand your point that
My point is
yes,
they put
it's
up a
our
little skinny one.
policy. No, it's our policy that for just as other public utilities like Duke have their own standards, that we have developed our own, and we as a company have determined that Class 3 is our standard.
Okay, but that can change.
Well, yes, but
Okay,
just as any public utility standards could change.
Mr. Robertson, and also to address your concern, there is the setback away from residential dwellings.
Right.
Within the text amendment.
Correct.
I want to go back to that setback. I don't mean to belabor the point. I've been doing this a while, and the breadth of my knowledge expands daily. Up until tonight, I thought a pole was a pole was a pole, but evidently I was wrong. But to those of us who are not well versed in a Class 3 or Class 4 pole, my concern is if this pole is laying in somebody's yard and they call me and I tell them that, well, it shouldn't have, it's a Class 3 pole, I'm not sure that argument's going to fly with that property owner. That's my concern. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but he's going to think I'm pretty stupid. And
right. Well,
a better explanation than that, I guess, is what I'm saying. So, and that goes back to my concern about your ratio.
Well, I do think that ATC would be willing to consider larger setbacks if you wanted something 1.5 feet for every foot in height to extend that.
Okay.
Does the 1 foot in height start 30 feet off of the property? And then if it's 60 feet tall, then essentially it would be 90 feet off of the property? Or does it start at the property line?
Well, I think that
As the text
the way
amendment reads.
the text amendment reads from residential dwellings. So it's really not a property line issue. It's away from residences. Maybe I've misunderstood your question.
Okay.
So if it's snapped off at the ground, it still doesn't hit your house, but
Right, because it's 30 feet removed from the home, and then if it's 60 feet tall, then it's an additional 60 feet. Correct?
Right.
Is that
Well,
no?
if it's 1 foot per foot of height, and let's say the
Minimum 30 feet away from a residential thing.
30 feet from the. I'm sorry.
You've got two setbacks. You've got one setback from a residential dwelling. That's the one that's 1 foot for each foot in height of the tower. So if you've got a 60-foot pole, the pole is at least 60 feet away from the house.
Okay.
But there's also a setback of 30 feet from the property line, because you could have a house that's far away from the property line or very close to the property line. So whichever the greatest distance would be how far that would be away from the property line and home.
Okay, I don't want to deny these folks opportunity to share with us a degree of knowledge, but for the sake of time, I'll give you folks an opportunity to respond to any concerns in a few minutes, but let's go ahead and let some other folks speak at this time, if we could.
That's fine, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, in the interest of fairness, I'm first going to let somebody speak who is in opposition to this. If you would come forth, sir, and state your name.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good evening. My name's Alan Boyce. I live off of Lightship Drive and Brawley School Road, and I'm a resident of the Point development. And I'm here tonight because there's many of us in our community are very concerned about this specific proposal that's being offered. And as you know, and that's been discussed so far this evening, it's been under consideration for a long time. We first learned about this back in the Point about 1.5 years ago. And since that time, the county boards, including the Board of Adjustment and the Planning Board, has looked at this repeatedly. The Planning Board 3 times has looked at this issue and have done extensive review on it. And in the last meeting, they rejected this whole proposal. And when they did reject it, they made the comment that it was not in the interest of the county and that there was a need for a special use permit in order to allow the citizens to be able to make their comments concerning this specific issue. Now, it's been addressed that a special use permit is cumbersome. I think a special use permit is important for the citizens, particularly when a system like this is going to be placed in their community. Ooh, jumping ahead here. There we go. Boy, this is sensitive. Excuse me. A comment was made about the Homeowners Association being in favor of this, and in fact, that is true. They have voted in favor of it. However, I can assure you there is great concern in the community among a large number of people who are directly in opposition to this plan. And in fact, we have had all kinds of issues such as petitions being signed, requests for meetings. We've had meetings, we've had emails. And in fact, at the county meetings that I referenced, the planning board meetings, we've had over 20 of our residents drive all the way up from the Point just to testify or to make their concerns known about this specific procedure. So again, it's of very great interest to those of us in the community, and there are very many of us who are opposed to it. And it's a very contentious issue within the Point presently. Now, the reason it's contentious, of course, is that many people believe that putting these cell phone towers, and we're talking about the off-easement areas now, we're in our local area of our community, are going to dramatically affect what we have. And what we have at the Point, as in many other communities in the county, is we have underground utilities. They're very expensive to install. but they're very beneficial because they add a clutter-free environment to your community, they add to your property values, and they add to the neighborhood itself, and that we really like the appearance and the quality that we get from that. Now we're faced with a situation with this company wanting to come in and to place a major project into our community, involving putting up 4 of these mini cell towers, again, telephone poles with antennas on them, tie them all together with about 4.5 miles of cabling, and then having a hub which is about the size of a small building. This is a large project for our community. So when this happens, we're going to lose this clutter-free environment that we get from having underground utilities. That's why there's so many people that are concerned about this. Now the talk is, why do we need this? It's for cell phone service. But we have cell phone service. The cell phone service that we have now is provided by this tower, and most of you are familiar with it. It's the Mayhew Tower. It's located off of Brawley School Road. It's an ugly tower, obviously, but it's located in a remote area, but still adjacent to our community. In fact, all the homes within the point are within about 2.7 miles of this facility, so we get very good coverage. Now, it's not perfect coverage. This is cell phones, so it's radio frequencies, and there are going to be some small areas where there may be some marginal coverage. But in general, this is good coverage provided by this tower. In fact, the cell phone providers, the 4 that we're talking about here in our community, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, and AT&T, use this tower. Now, of those 4, only one of them, AT&T, is complaining about the service, and they're asking ATC to bring a system into the point to correct that. The other 3 have yet to make any mention that they're having a problem at all. In fact, when you contact them, they say, well, our service is out there is fairly good. We don't have a lot of complaints. They consider it to be good to excellent using this equipment that they now have. Okay, we have this situation where many people in the point are quite happy with what we have. However, ATC now is talking about bringing this whole system into our community. We go from a cell tower that's located in a remote location, and now we're going to move a big system into our community. Where are they going to put this? Well, they're going to put it in high-density locations. These 4 locations are throughout the point. We have 867 lots at the point. They're going to be put in various places throughout the community, the 4 of them. This picture on the left depicts a map of the village section of the point, and the area outlined in yellow is the lot that has been identified by ATC to place a tower. Now, as you can see, it's completely surrounded by other homes. In fact, 6 other homes are immediately adjacent to the lot that they intend to put this tower on. So when they put this tower on, or put the tower up, obviously it's going to be an eyesore for these people who live nearby. If you were waking up every morning and looking out your window and seeing this tower, you would not be happy. The other concern we have is it's introducing an element of danger into our community. It's going to be the tallest structure in the community. That's what the towers are about. They're going to be higher than the buildings, higher than the trees to do their transmissions. But as such, they're going to be highly susceptible to lightning strikes. Now, we have a lot of thunderstorms around here and a lot of lightning damage. This picture shows some of our lightning damage that we've had in the point 2 years ago. This home caught on fire due to the effects of lightning. It was not hit by lightning. The lightning actually hit in the backyard, and the fire marshal said a surge of electricity came through piping in the ground into the house, causing a fire, resulting in a complete destruction of this home. So there is an element of danger here, and now we're talking about putting up these tall structures in the very midst of our community. Of course, you've also always mentioned so far about the issue about storm damage, hurricanes. We've all seen telephone poles that have been snapped right in half or right at the base. So again, this is an issue that has to be concerned with. So because of these issues, the appearance, the quality of the neighborhood, the danger issues, we believe that if a DAS system is introduced into our community, there should be some reasonable restrictions made. The first one being a special use permit for any community in the county. If they're going to install this system into a neighborhood, then the people in that neighborhood ought to know about it, understand it, be able to come to a public meeting and talk about it and make their comments known. Just public involvement in something that's going to dramatically affect their neighborhood. The second thing is we believe there should be a height limit of 45 feet. And there should be adequate separation from these towers from any residential homes. We're saying 150 feet. Now, we had some discussion here about setbacks and everything else, but there's one important issue that was not highlighted in this, and that is they intend to put these supposedly surrounded by trees. And if these towers are surrounded by trees, then there's not going to be any limit on height. There's not going to be a limit in separation between that tower and a home because they're supposedly camouflaged by the trees. We just think this is unacceptable. We have to have some kind of separation for the very things that Mr. Johnson mentioned. We don't want these towers collapsing into somebody else's property, under their car, under their house, under their swing set in the backyard. It's only right that if they should fall or collapse, they should stay in the yard that they've been placed into. We also believe that the DAS operator, if he gets permission to come in, he should certify that there are no other infrastructures that he can use to put these towers up or put these antennas on. In other words, he should do a survey and make sure there's no telephone poles or existing towers or buildings that they can put these antennas on, rather than moving into an established community and establishing an antenna net throughout the community, building up all these towers with antennas on them when they could possibly use some other kind of structure. And then the final issue is, this is a business that is undergoing rapid change. There's high technology going on every day as far as transmission of data. We believe that this system of towers and antennas will likely become outmoded in the next few years. There's miniature antennas being developed. There's tie-ins to the internet being developed. This could all be obsolete within a few years, and we would be stuck with these towers throughout our community. So basically, this is our concern. We're concerned about the appearance of our community, our property values, and what it means to our neighborhood. But also, what's it going to mean to the future neighborhoods in Iredell County? Most new neighborhoods are going to want to have underground utilities. Are they actually going to get underground utilities? If the DAS companies want to come in and there's no towers, they're going to want to put their towers up. Then there's not going to be underground utilities. There's going to be overhead utilities. And if you were a developer building a new subdivision, you would have to go to a company like the power company or a telephone company, try to convince them to put their equipment underground at great expense, and they know that another company is coming in a year later to put up towers above ground. They're not going to want to sign on to those kind of easements. In your packages that you received earlier in the week that you obviously have reviewed, there's a comment there about the 2030 plan and how we should accept this proposal because it will prove that we're business friendly here in the county. Now, we want to be friends too. We want to be friends with business, of course. But again, this is affecting our very neighborhoods. This is affecting our homes, and we have a lot of money invested in them. And we have a lot of time and effort to make these the best places we could possibly ever live. So yes, we want to have a business-friendly environment, but we want to have a community-friendly environment. These folks here, American Tower Corporation, are in the business to build towers and wireless systems. Now, they're not going up to North Iredell, where they really need the cell phone service to build these systems. They're coming down to the high-density areas where we are, where we already have cell phone service. They're coming there for one reason. That's where the market is. That's where they can make the money. So they're coming to get a market, a big share of that market that's available out there. And do they really care about what happens to our community in the future? That's our concern. They're concerned about a business plan. We're concerned about our community. So we believe, we're asking you, when you consider this, to look at the reasonable restrictions that we're presenting to you tonight and perhaps include those in any recommendations you make. Thank you very much for your attention. I can answer any questions you may have.
I'd like to ask Mr. Boyce a question. Yes. You stated that you live in the Point.
I certainly do.
Are you a member of the Homeowners Association?
I am.
Well, I thought I understood a minute ago that we're going to have the Homeowners Association, someone speak, and they voted unanimous in favor of this.
That's correct.
And I thought I heard you say in your presentation there are 857 lots.
867 lots.
All right, and you said 20 people showed up at the planning board meeting. So if my figures are about right, that tells me maybe 10 families showed up. So how big is the homeowners association compared to your group? Because I mean, we're going to have some differences here, it looks like.
Well, again, as I mentioned before, this was a unanimous vote on the part of the homeowners board of directors. It is a very contentious issue in our community, as you'll hear more of tonight. All I can say is that from the very start, when this was proposed by the president of our homeowners association, there was great opposition to it. People do not believe it's going to have a significant effect on our neighborhood. And again, there was comments made, emails made. We asked for a special meeting to discuss this particular thing. Finally, a special meeting was called for, a town meeting. There was 50 people there. 49 people were not in favor of this proposal. We asked for a survey of the whole community as to how they felt. That was not accomplished. So again, we have some dissension within the community and the board as to what's actually the will of the people.
Thank you.
Okay. A homeowners association with conflict. Stop the presses, Jim. This is a story. Okay. Got to ask you the hard questions. These folks are wanting to put up 60-foot towers or poles. You're saying 45. But the taller the tower, the fewer the poles. So if you go, if we grant your request at 45 feet per pole, then are you willing to allow more poles?
Well, that's an interesting question.
That's why I asked it.
Absolutely. The point I would like to make is we have one big tower right now that's solving our problems. We're talking about putting 4 new towers into our community. I mean, to me, we're not reducing the number of towers here. We're quadrupling the number of towers here. So in that particular case, when you say the height limit, what I'm looking at here is 45 feet. It's taller than this room. And yet we're talking about something that's very intrusive into our community. It's going to be in your backyard. So the less intrusive we can make it, the shorter that we can make it and accomplish whatever they need to accomplish. That's their job to accomplish their mission, not ours. But again, we're willing to see this come, but we believe we should have some restrictions to protect our property values.
Okay. But you're saying that it'll be in your backyard, but you showed us a slide and you said, and it appeared to be a lot, one of the only lots with no house on it.
That's correct.
Okay. And that person who owns that lot has given the permission to put a pole there. Is that a true statement?
That lot is a septic lot owned by the homeowners association. All the people, all the residents of our neighborhood own that lot.
Okay. How many pole do you know, and how many poles have to be located for this project where an individual property owner had to say yes?
Well, again, these are going to be placed on community-owned property.
Okay, so none of them are on individually owned
properties?
Not on
individual properties, no. Okay. However, if you look at the situation in the future elsewhere in the county, they could well be located on an individual's property, and his next-door neighbor wouldn't have any effect on whether or not they were there or not. That's why I believe there should be some county regulations and restrictions.
Okay. Can we take a pause here just a minute? The interest of these young gentlemen out here over the number of poles on the point seems to be waning, and they look like diligent young men dying to get home to complete their homework. So we're going to afford them an opportunity to march out.
Can we recognize them? These are the scouts from Troop 171 at Williamson Chapel. These are my scouts too. I'm an assistant scoutmaster there, and tonight their adult leader was Peter Brown, who's the committee chair, and he's got 5 different adult volunteers that came out tonight. Which when you think of folks in the me generation and stuff, these are adult leaders who absolutely give of their time for the benefit of these young men. And our scouts, I think we had, 14 here. Our troop has almost 100 scouts. The fact that you had 14 come out and sit through a very interesting conversation, but anyway, they're working on a communications merit badge, correct? Okay, and this is how government works, and a whole lot of communication going on. And I hope you learned something tonight. So, good night, Scouts. What?
If I could make a brief comment.
Yes, sir.
I have a question, too.
A lot of this is just like anything. It's a not in your backyard issue. Those of us who are mostly affected about it are the ones that are mostly involved with it, as usual. But again, we're talking about a community issue here where we're trying to protect not just our community, but the county. Because this is going to keep occurring over and over again at every new subdivision that's created here in our county. So while we may have some people here on the board who agree with this, there's not one of the 7 members on the board who lives within a quarter mile of where these towers are going to go. So their perspective may be a little bit different than that of someone who's going to see it in their backyard.
How close are you to one of the towers?
I'm about 800 feet away. And to me, honestly, it's not a significant issue, although I believe it's sort of an attack on the community.
Mr. Bush, do you have AT&T as a provider?
I have Verizon.
Okay.
Now, many people have had AT&T, been very dissatisfied with it, and have gone over to other companies. Now, this has been not just a local problem, but, of course, AT&T has had some significant system problems, and that's been the result of some of these changeovers. But many people are now quite happy with what they have. Obviously, there's some people are not happy. They're not getting the quite... I've talked to one person who said he couldn't get cell phone service in his basement. Well, maybe not. I mean, you know, it's radio waves. Sometimes it won't go to a basement. So there's certain expectations you just have to accept with the system.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Boyd.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. At this point, we'll allow someone to speak who's in favor of this.
While they're coming up.
If you would, sir, when you get to the microphone, state your name, please, sir.
Well, while they're coming up, I mean, we clearly this is going to be one of those votes where we go home and we wonder if we made the right decision. I mean, we've got our planning board that voted unanimously against this. Our planning staff was for it. I've met with the folks that want to put the system in, and you know they seem to be wanting to do the right thing. You know, hearing from individual property owners, certainly you can be empathetic with that. I mean, this is not an easy decision that we've got to make. And this is one of those thin pancakes where, boy, it's got 2 sides. So bear with us as we ask you questions and try to make our way, okay?
Okay. Absolutely. I welcome your questions. My name is Jim Litzy. I'm president of the Point Owners Association. I've been president of the association for the entire time that this issue has been under consideration by the association. I've been a member of the board since its inception when Crescent turned over the homeowner association to the members 5 years ago. We have been working on this for over a year and a half. ATC first approached our board with the proposal to come in and put in the kind of system that you have heard described. We have looked at all kinds of issues. We've looked at the safety issues. We've looked at the need. We have held a town hall meeting for our members. We've invited all the residents to send us emails with their concerns and their comments. We have posted on the association's website all types of information relating to what a DAS system is, what these nodes are, where they were proposed to be located. A number of different sites have been considered over that year and a half period. I would say that probably at this point, there's not one of the 4 sites that is in the original site in which it was proposed. There were originally, I think, 6 sites actually proposed in the point. 2 of those have been moved outside of the point onto above-ground utility poles, and there are 4 proposed to be in the point within the point community. 2 on land owned by the Owners Association, and 2 on land owned by the Point Lake and Golf Club. I would first like to say that, this is really not about the point. I mean, this text amendment is not a referendum on whether we need DAS service in the point, but I think the opposition is really framing it that way, so I think that those are the issues that I would like to address. And I do think that the issues that we've considered in the point are instructive of the same issues that any community in Iredell County would consider. One thing that is very unique about our community is that it is surrounded on 3 sides by water. And we have, on the one side that does not have water, that's where we have the existing large cell phone tower that you've seen. In most areas outside of high-density urban areas, you can always find some place that's not near residential development to locate a tall cell tower, and that will satisfy the needs for the residents in that area, for the people that tower would serve. That's really not the case for the Southern Brawley Peninsula. Unless you go across the water on the other side, it's just too far away. There is no place on the Southern Brawley Peninsula at this time where you could put a large cell tower like that wouldn't be absolutely atrocious and probably wouldn't meet any of the existing zoning requirements to install that cell tower. We very early on concluded that there is a need, despite what you've heard, for improving cell service in the point. This system really covers approximately half of the point. It starts, if you're familiar with the point, it really starts at the traffic circle and goes south from there. I think that my understanding from ATC is a reason for that is that the carriers do believe, and again, this is not driven by the point, it's not driven by ATC, it's driven by the wireless carriers. They are the ones that want to improve their service. They want to improve their service because their customers are demanding it. No one is going to go out and invest millions of dollars in improving a wireless system unless they think it's absolutely necessary to service their customers. That's just common sense. No business goes out and builds, unless you want to build a bridge to nowhere, unless it's government money. No private business is going to make an investment like that unless they perceive there's a need and that people are going to be willing to pay for that service they're providing. So we have gotten numerous emails. There are 7 elected members of our board. 4 of us are here tonight, and one other is going to speak. We have been talking to our neighbors, talking and fielding emails from people both in support and certainly some opposed to this project. Really the only ones that are left, I think, that are opposed to this project are the gentlemen that are speaking tonight. There have been others that have been opposed over the year and a half that their opposition has really dropped as when poles were relocated to other locations. But I would say that this is not a contentious issue in the point. I mean, no one really talks about this other than I get phone calls all the time of when is this going to happen. I get phone calls. I've had phone calls from real estate brokers that say, when are we going to improve the cell service in the point? Because when people come here to look at homes, they can't get cell reception, and they're concerned about that. I mean, I get calls from doctors that say, I can't get a cell signal in my house, and I need to be able to do that. So when are we going to get this system operational? So there clearly is a need, certainly not for everyone. I wouldn't suggest that every resident of the point needs to improve their cell service, but I can assure you that there are many that would like to, and most of those are people that live on the Southern Brawley Peninsula, because it's just a fact that if you start at the circle, which is where these residents live, they may have very good cell service, but the further you go south on the peninsula, the worse it gets. You get further away from the cell tower, the worse the signal is. That's just the way it works. We have worked for a year and a half with ATC to balance the needs of the community against this perception that it's going to be a blight on the community. All 4 nodes are being located in locations that are, for the most, are really going to be invisible. The point is a very heavily wooded area. There are millions of loblolly pines. They're falling. Every time there's a storm, we have pines down in our neighborhood. Those are certainly a lot more dangerous than one of these. This pole's going to be a lot sturdier than most of the pines in the neighborhood. But those pines provide, a good screening for an accessory structure like this. We have negotiated an agreement with ATC. Our agreement, and of course this would not apply to every community that might be interested in the service, but in our case, they have agreed that the poles would not extend above, that the pole itself would not extend above the surrounding tree canopy. So the only thing that would extend above those trees would be the antenna itself. So in terms of what would prevent them from making the poles whatever height they want, that is one thing that would prevent it. We have negotiated a removal bond to remove the poles if they ever are, if they don't use them anymore. So I think ATC has been, very supportive of trying to achieve a reasonable balance of improving cell service while at the same time not imposing a burden on the community. And we think that the text amendment adequately protects not only communities with above-ground utilities, but communities with underground utilities. And I'd be happy to answer any questions in terms of what we considered in our deliberations in unanimously approving a resolution to move forward with ATC and negotiate with them to allow this service in our community.
Okay. So all of the locations where they've recommended putting in a pole, your board agrees 100% that you're good with it.
Yes, there is one pole that is likely to be moved, and we met with ATC actually on Friday, and that is the pole that is the one on that lot right there. Actually, that pole we're considering moving that to a location that would not be really near any home. It would be actually. What we're considering would be in the traffic circle at the point, and it would be inside a flagpole, and we would have a U.S. flag, and they would light it, and that's something ATC would pay for, and so that particular node would be totally invisible.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You've listened to residents for and against this issue?
Yes, we've had, yes.
And other board members have as well?
Absolutely.
And the consensus still was to move forward?
Absolutely.
You feel it's in the best interest of the majority of the residents at the point?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, are you aware? Because if they had overhead, as I understand it, if you were putting this system into a neighborhood that had power lines overhead, you would run your fiber optic cable on those same poles, correct? Yes. Okay. But in neighborhoods where the utilities are underground, then is there a mechanism at the point that they're able to run cable without digging up?
There are. Time Warner Cable, I think, does have underground conduit, but that was not, I don't think they had the capacity for their poles, so they would be pulling new underground cable. They do that by, they pull that under the ground.
They pull it, they don't dig up, they're not digging up.
Right. And they drill under streets and things like that. Now, and we have been through a construction project like that when Time Warner Cable upgraded their service. We had a number of issues with that, and we have tried to address those issues with ATC. We're very comfortable that, I mean, they have installed other systems in surrounding communities in the peninsula, for example, where they've also hidden poles on the peninsula golf course, and we're comfortable that it would be done in a prudent way, and when it's all said and done, the land would be restored to what it was when they started.
You said you negotiate. One of the points that Mr. Boyce made was if this technology is replaced in 5 years, which, I mean, we don't, in 5 years, yeah, things can change. If it were to be obsolete, you're saying that y'all have there's a bond so that they would remove all the poles and antennas, and that there was like a little substation with it, the small
right.
building?
Well, and the what they call the base station, which would be located on additional property that the Point presently owns.
Okay, so they would, that bond would cover getting all that removed.
Yeah, our agreement provides that they would remove any improvements to 3 feet below grade, and that if they didn't do it, then there would be a performance bond that would be maintained during the term of the lease and easement to do that.
Okay, Mr. Pope, would there be a legal reason why that could not be part of future? If we were to allow these systems to come in, I mean, this homeowner association is very different from most other homeowners associations, but certainly, I think if it was a smaller homeowners association that didn't have an attorney who was president, he might not have gotten quite the same deal. Is it possible that our text amendment could make the same provision for other homeowners or for other projects?
Are you asking, is it possible to include in the ordinance a requirement that the homeowners association be in favor of?
No. That there's a bond to remove it.
Sure, I think so.
Okay. I mean, otherwise we end up with poles forever. Who takes it down, you know?
Right, and the technology is changing. Our agreement provides that if it becomes technologically obsolete, they have the right to terminate their lease, and they would take everything back. And
okay.
Yeah, I think in that sense it is different probably from a typical utility that you would expect that probably those electric transmission lines are going to be there for the foreseeable future.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition? If you would come forward, sir. State your name, please.
Good evening. My name is Walter Overcash. And before I get started, I might want to point out to you that, let me see your mouse there for a second. I live in this house right here. That proposed pole is 222.5 feet from my bedroom. That's why I'm here tonight. I'm glad to hear they're planning to move it. I'm a resident of Iredell County and have been for the last 11 years. My wife and I live at 170 Old Post Road in the Point community in Mooresville, North Carolina. I'm here tonight to speak against the approval of the American Tower Corporation proposed amendment to the Iredell County Land Development Code. As you are aware, your planning board has rejected this amendment or its 2 previous drafts, 3 consecutive monthly meetings, and I have attended those 3 meetings as well as an appeals board meeting. So I'm very comfortable at this desk up here right now. Been here before. I would like to comment, though, on the fact that I've heard several times that our board of directors at the Homeowners Association voted unanimously to approve this. That is true. Your planning board voted unanimously to reject it. That is true. Who didn't get a vote were the other 725 homeowners at the Point or the other 159,000 members of the Iredell County community. I want to point out the fact that we were not represented by that homeowner's decision. We were not allowed to vote on it. We were not allowed to, our opinions were rejected out of hand over and over and over again. I have two main objections to this issue. One is the height and setback restrictions are not sufficient. This picture up here depicts that lot that you saw behind my house. This picture was taken on September the 2nd. I don't know where you live, but where we live, on that Friday night, there was a thunderstorm and lightning storm that blew these pine trees over. The location that this thing is proposed to be is right behind that fence over there, right behind that tree that fell over, 30 feet from the property line and 60 feet from my neighbor's house. I contend that that is not sufficient setback for putting up a 60-foot lightning rod next door to my house. I also suggest that there's a lack of requirement for obtaining a special use permit for installing these dash units on residential private property outside the DOT right-of-way. I'm not talking about DOT right-of-way issues. By a for-profit corporation in which, in my opinion, and hopefully yours, clearly changes the intended use of that property from residential to a quasi, if not totally, commercial use. I've taken the liberty of taking their proposed amendment and putting a red pen to it. These are suggestions that I have repeatedly offered forward, and to this point, nobody has accepted anything we've suggested in any way, shape, or form as far as these setback requirements are concerned. First of all, item 1C, I suggest that we take the mumbo-jumbo out of there about being able to place this in a DOT right-of-way behind trees. That's not my real issue. That's for the state DOT, which are not in favor of that either, I don't think. My real issue is with their items 2A. As you read their proposed amendment, it says that setback should be 1 foot for every foot of height. I'm suggesting it should be 150-foot minimum. This is the same math that's used today on your 500-foot setbacks requirement for a cell tower. For example, the one on Mayhew Road is 197 feet tall. It's 2.5. It has to be set back 2.5 times its height from any house. I'm suggesting the same height restrictions on a DAS pole antenna system. 2B, the existing amendment suggests that a 30-foot setback from a property line is sufficient. I don't think so. I think that a pole should be set back at least 1 foot for every foot of height that is, such that it provides a fall zone. A pole that falls down cannot fall on my property. As you recall, that tree fell across that fence just now into that guy's backyard, and it was set there for a week until we got it moved. Number 2D, I suggest that we delete that entirely. That item simply gives people the ability to put a pole anywhere they see fit or get somebody's opinion about if it's hidden behind a tree, even if it's 2 feet from a property line or 25 feet from somebody's house. I think that should be removed. That kind of subjectivity has no place in an ordinance that's requiring addressing zoning issues. And lastly, 2E, I suggest we add a requirement in this amendment for a special use permit for any construction that's granted on property, on these types of units on any property. The amendment as drafted would allow placement of a dash unit on private property zoned R20 without a special use permit. ATC has selected a 125 by 225-foot lot in the picture up here for the installation of a 60-foot pole 30 feet from a property line and 60 feet from a house. There are existing homes, as you saw from that map, on both sides across the street and around that lot. The lot selected, this is another issue that nobody's addressed, that lot selected is dedicated and reserved for septic service by its recorded plat and by the North Carolina Special Warranty Deed and Bill of Sale. It's dedicated and reserved for septic service. I contend that putting a pole on there, making it a quasi-commercial application, at least requires a special use permit so that some careful consideration can be, thoughtful consideration can be given to aesthetic, property value consequences, and safety issues that surround placement of a pole on a piece of property. Even though it's private property, if we don't have a special use permit, I can let National Tower Corporation come in and put a pole on my property without my next door neighbor objecting to it. That isn't right. I ask that you reject this amendment as written. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions? Yes, not. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak in favor, please come forward. Yes, sir. you would come and state your name, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Hank Hale. I'm a resident of the Point community. I live on the south side. I'm also a member of the Point Owners Association Board of Directors. Let me just first, if I may, make a statement from a citizen resident point of view that I have Verizon service on the south side, and it's absolutely atrocious. I cannot complete a call in my house, and most often not in my yard. And I would ask the commissioners to consider what Mr. Litzy was alluding to, that further south, outside of the Point, there are hundreds of residents on that peninsula that are depending on some improvement for today's technology, and who knows what might be available to us all in the future. My main point that I wanted to, if I could just share a few photographs briefly with you here, is the issue of underground utilities. Sometimes that gets misconstrued. What it really means is we have no telephone poles with overhead power lines, but we have hundreds of above-ground utility pieces of equipment that are operated by Duke Power, the Point Lake and Golf Club, the Owners Association, TCW Wastewater, Box of Rain Irrigation Company, Utilities Inc., which is the water company. And these devices are scattered all through the community. Some of these examples there are hundreds of, some there are fewer, but all are within sight of at least one or more residences within the Point community. So this is one example. There are numerous of which way do I go?
You just have to click on the picture you want because you didn't have it in the PowerPoint.
I just click left click?
No, just click on each picture that you want.
Okay. Oh, I see. All right. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Another example, clear view of many, many homes in the area. It's another one. This is right along a residential street in the front yard. Here's one of the existing antenna or communication systems. Here's another one. Another box in the front yard that's been camouflaged somewhat with trees. Here's a Duke Power example of a communications notification device. Now that's an ugly one, isn't it? That's right in somebody's front yard. Another antenna communication device, front yard, another front yard, and finally another front yard. So I would submit, while the community is not burdened by overhead power lines, that there are examples of things that don't look too good around there. So I would submit to you that 4 single poles concealed in trees certainly would not be visually objectionable as much as what we already have. So I think that's a moot point, and I'd ask you to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let's see if there's anybody else who wants to speak here. And we'll wrap this public hearing up, and then we can interact with staff. All right. Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? All right, in the interest of fairness, Mr. Boyce has his hand up over here. Now, let me make something clear. This is not going to get into a back and forth, okay? Mr. Boyce, I'm going to allow you to speak for 3 minutes, and I'm going to allow these folks representing ATC to speak for 3 minutes. And that's
Certainly, I won't take 3 minutes.
Don't be too heavy-handed, but we're going to remain in control up here. Okay?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
The pictures that we've seen obviously are true and correct. They're there. But again, the majority of the pictures are of utilities that are required to connect phone systems that are no taller than about this. They're not 60, 70 feet tall poles. The only pole that's tall is the one provided by Duke Power, which has a siren on it to announce to the world that they've got a casualty down at the nuke plant. That was here before we ever even got here. And the only other comment I'll make, and I'll leave, is this. People come to our community not for cell phone service. They come because they love the way it looks and it appears and the way they feel about living there, not whether or not the cell phones work very well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Okay, you folks want to have any closing argument, and then we'll close the public hearing. Okay? I'm going to afford you up to 3 minutes.
Yes, sir, and hopefully I won't need the whole time.
Okay.
Again, I'm Carmen Rajamani from American Tower, and I just wanted to briefly touch on a couple of things that were raised today. First of all, just as point of pride, at our last planning board meeting, the vote was not unanimous. I did get one vote that wanted, it was 6-1. So that one vote was hard fought, so I wanted to mention that. First, I understand our opposing residents' concern about DAS and that it's an underground utility development, and that's what draws people there. Again, DAS is the most visually unobtrusive infrastructure method of installing and providing wireless coverage today. Other than, the fact is that there is poor coverage, that we have run our own studies and talked to all of the major carriers. As a major infrastructure provider, we've talked to them all. In addition to AT&T, T-Mobile also has a similar extremely poor coverage. We have talked to Verizon and to Sprint. Their coverage is marginal and continues to get worse as you go south towards the water. The fact is you're not going to be able to get a tower down there. And so DAS is an infrastructure solution for that. I wanted to touch on the lightning strikes, that our node poles in and of themselves do not attract lightning, just as a utility pole put up by Duke Power does not attract lightning. That the node, every piece of equipment that we place on there is grounded. In fact, the antenna is encased in fiberglass. And the node pole itself has 2 places where it is grounded, at the base and 6 feet away. And Duke Power, they take lightning extremely seriously. They would not allow us to install our node equipment on their poles if they thought that our equipment attracted lightning. Additionally, I understand the residents' concern, and that one of the points of asking for an SUP is for notice. Frankly, that's why a lot of the residents are here opposing, is because we did provide them notice in the fact of did numerous publications that were posted on the HOA website, and we did an open house where we did have a number of residents come out and speak. And lastly, on the existing poles and proliferation of poles, our preference is to use existing infrastructure. That's why we went to Duke first. And frankly, that's what Rebecca Harper looked at and approved for electrical permits for our nodes, because we thought we could go on Duke poles. Placing our own poles is absolutely our last resort. Frankly, it's more expensive, and all day long, I'd rather go on an existing pole. And lastly, we do care about the point. That's why, frankly, we've been here for the better part of 2 years. My competitors would have put them up right in the right of way. So we do take this extremely seriously, and that's why we've continued and want a text amendment so that there is regulation upon us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. At this point, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed. And
Can I not ask a question?
You can ask one of staff.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what on section 2D,
Yes, sir.
2D, line 2, it says, otherwise reasonably concealed by another method as approved by the zoning administrator. Who's the zoning administrator?
I am.
You are? Okay. Comma, it is not subject to any height or setback restriction. So that means that if you think that it's concealed properly, that they could put the pole on a property line?
No, not
a 60-foot pole 40 feet away from a house?
Right, not necessarily, no, sir. We would still take into account all the other setback and height limitations. This was just to give us, if the tower is, or the pole is concealed, if it's in a grove of pine trees, then we can take that into account as we factor in the setback to the property line. And that's my understanding. Again, Rebecca, if you've got more clarification, please. Okay.
It says if it's reasonably concealed, it's not subject to any height or setback restriction. And that's the way, I mean, that's what it says.
Right. And that is if it's concealed.
Okay, so if it's concealed, then somebody can put a 60-foot tower, a 60-foot pole, 40 feet from a roof.
Well, and remember too that concealed could be this device, as far as I understand, could be in a flagpole or it could be in a steeple. It's not necessarily just limited to a telephone pole. So that's where this concealment idea gets its emphasis, is these other methods of concealing these devices.
Okay, so a freestanding pole would be subject to any height or setback restriction.
I believe so, yes. Yes, provided it's not concealed.
I think a good example, and I'm sorry to butt in, I think a good example is what I think Carmen mentioned or someone mentioned about putting it in a flagpole, and that flagpole may be 80 feet tall, but it's concealed within that flagpole. If Mr. Ruskowski agrees that that is adequate and that they're concealing that antenna, then that is a logical and basically an approvable way of doing that.
I hate to belabor the point, but I mean, I'm more concerned about it. If you've got a 60-foot utility pole next to a 60-foot pine tree, that pine tree is going to fall way before that pole ever will fall. Okay, so I mean, if it's just obscured by pine trees, then that's good enough to get away from all the restrictions?
Well, if we also see that it's a residential piece of property that could be built upon at some point in the future, or there are existing residences surrounding that pole, then we're going to take all of that into account. If it's on a lot such as what was looked at tonight, where it was a perpetual septic easement lot, and we look at the height and it has the proper height and setback restrictions, then we can approve it in that manner. So it's really, this allows us to have some flexibility on a case-by-case basis, not just for properties in the point, but countywide as well for all. We cannot possibly create text that will cover every circumstance.
And we don't want you to.
Sure.
And we don't want you to. Mr. Pope, so what happens if in a different development, somebody said, and we're dealing with a less reputable company, I'll give that to you, and they come and they say, listen, we can put it behind this. There's a little clump of 4 trees over here. They're 20 feet tall. We're going to put in a 50-foot pole. The trees are going to grow. It's going to cover them up eventually. They're concealed. The height restriction doesn't matter. Okay, as it's written, then if he says yes, it's concealed, then can they say as long as it's concealed, then the setback restrictions don't matter? Or can he say, yeah, it's concealed, but you're still too close. You've still got to have some setback.
I think the way it's written is, if it is determined to be concealed, it does appear to be exempt from any height or setback restriction. So the question is, do you trust the zoning administrator's judgment about concealment?
If it's concealed by, there's a difference between concealment and fall protection. If it said, being concealed means it's obstructed from view. It doesn't mean that somebody's roof is protected.
Well, I agree with that.
So the reason for having the setback is so that if the thing falls down, it doesn't fall through somebody's roof. Now, if you install it on top of somebody's roof and they're okay with it, well, that's their business, okay? I mean, you can't have a setback if you're installing it on a dwelling. That's fine. My question is, just because it's obscured from view, does then that take it out of his hands? If he says, yes, it's obscured from view, now all of a sudden it doesn't matter if it can fall on somebody's roof line.
I think the way it's written, it does. You're exactly right.
Okay.
If he determines that it is concealed, then they are exempt.
Correct. So the way it's written, really, the set is a way of getting around we have some exposure there. The property owner does. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions of staff?
Can I look through? Because I've been making notes as they talk. If you give me notes.
Yeah, that's fine. Y'all forgive me. Sometime I forget I'm the chairman up here and I'm deep in thought. But, I agree with what Mr. Robertson is saying up to this point. I think to make this thing workable, is this a reasonable assumption, Mr. Pope, to make something of this order work? There's going to have to be some subjectivity in any type of ordinance like this, and the goal should be not to insulate the public total from any negative vicissitudes of life, if you will, but is limit those as best you can. Should be your goal. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yes, sir.
Feel free to ask a question at your pleasure. I'll take just a minute.
Put that in there.
Yeah.
I've got a few points of discussion, if I could.
Okay.
And then we can talk about how to proceed from there. My inclination is to have an amendment that will allow this new system or technology to be used. I have four concerns that I would like to see addressed, though, before I could support it, before I could vote in the affirmative. And if we want to handle those tonight, that's fine. If y'all want to give it another shot a little bit later, that would be fine with me too, even though I know that's not what you want to hear. And that is, I still have a concern about, okay, we're going to put up 14 poles. What keeps Verizon and three other cell phone companies from coming in day after tomorrow, put in an application, and now all of a sudden I'm dealing with 40 poles, okay? So, and I realize that gee whiz, the homeowners association could say no, but they are a utility. Utilities have access to the right-of-way. So I would like for us to address how do we keep that from getting out of hand. I think that's a reasonable request. We do it with electric utility companies, and we've done it with landline telephone companies. You know, even though we had 14 different telephone companies, you don't have 14 different wires that run through a neighborhood. So the next one is on item 2D, section 2. I think, even though I really believe we shouldn't try to write every ordinance to take care of every single possible condition, I'm willing to accept that if the zoning administrator, it's up I guess, excuse me, that last line after the comma, if that was gone, I can support that one. But to say it's not subject to any height or setback restriction if it's concealed, I do believe then at that point all the other discussion about setback dimensions becomes worthless. The next one is, I commend this company. They did the right thing, and the Homeowners Association leadership did the right thing by asking for a bond to remove this hardware if this technology becomes obsolete. And it was the right thing to do here, but if I don't think all of our citizens are going to have the same sort of legal minds and representation working on behalf of their associations. I'd like to see something like that in the text amendment as well. And then the last thing with respect to the strength of the poles, instead of saying that it should be a type 3 pole or a type 4 pole, I'm willing to say that as long as they're using the same standards as the adjacent utility or the utility that serves that area, I'm satisfied with that, because 5 years from now they may come up with some new technology for poles. What I just don't want it to be is something where people are coming in and saying, hey, we're going to, these poles are too expensive, this project costs more than we thought, let's go with a skinny one as opposed to a light one. So those are my 4 objections. If we can get over those 4 objections, I could support it. But until we get over those 4 objections, I can't support it tonight.
Mr. Robertson, in regards to the cell phone companies, the AT&T is using them as a provider, and they said they have been contacted by other companies. It seems to me, from a business model, in the interest of money and saving money, that it would be the most natural route that other companies would look at ways to bring their system in, where from a business model, looking at what is already in existence, as they did, because they wanted to go on top of utility poles already in existence to save money. I think the market would dictate and take care of some of those issues.
If the market took care of those issues, AT&T would be doing the same thing up on that big tower that the other utilities have done, where they're providing good coverage. So,
but it sounds like that large tower is not providing service to the southern end. My thought.
The only.
I think that they said there were other. They did a study with T-Mobile as well, and the service was poor in the southern end of the point, as well as was. I believe that was. My point is, I'm wondering if that issue is not something that should be in our ordinance and our regulation. If that's kind of out of the bounds of what this text amendment is really about, that one issue. I agree with you on the other, but I'm wondering if we're straying a little bit from the text amendment on that.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. I would just like to have that question answered, because we know that Duke Power will not run a power line into Energy United isn't going to run a power line on the left side of the road, and Duke Power isn't going to run it on the right side of the road into a neighborhood, and they're going to argue about, and then they're going to try to sell power to individual people on a street. Okay, I'm just saying we already have a system that keeps that from happening. That's been good. Okay, this is new and this is different, and I think we should just make sure that we have the same good system, because nobody else has done this yet. We're the first, so we have to be careful. Okay,
actually, isn't the system in place?
That has happened in a neighborhood.
Isn't the system already in place in several other places in North Carolina? We are not the first. Is that correct? Correct. It's already operational in many other places in the state.
In cities, but not in the counties, correct?
No, it's how many?
Go ahead.
We're operational now in the towns of Huntersville and Cornelius, and in the city of Charlotte, that's nearby. Okay.
But
and Blowing Rock, North Carolina.
But there you have buildings that you can put stuff on. And you've got structures that can get you 60 feet up in the air. It's a little different.
Are you also in Chapel Hill?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Here are my concerns. I do, as I expressed earlier, I do believe that the 1 foot setback from residential development for every foot in height of tower, I do feel that is inadequate.
What would you like?
I could live with 1.5. I wouldn't want to go anything less than that.
Can y'all live with 1.5?
The other thing is that I do think there should be a condition that would require co-locations of new antennas on existing towers or existing poles.
If we did that, then that takes care of number one. My first point, which is how do we keep it being from multiple systems?
Right. It would be, I realize in doing that, I'm actually funneling business to these people.
Right.
But that is a valid concern. And I'm not going to deprive them of the benefit of that since they were the first one to take the risk and stick their neck out there. But it would keep additional poles from just popping up all over the country.
And, Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to interrupt. Just one point of clarification that staff communicated to me is that in our existing ordinance, as far as the location of new cell towers, we do have some language that addresses the emphasis to the companies to co-locate on existing towers or to prove there is a need for new facilities. So we could adapt some of that language, I feel like, into this policy.
Right.
As well.
I would like it expressly mentioned in this text.
Yes, sir.
To that effect.
Yes, sir.
The other thing, I do think that Mr. Robertson makes a valid point in this regard. These folks are willing to do so as an agreement with a private organization, but we don't know who we'll be dealing with in the future. I do think that if this technology becomes obsolete or that company for some reason goes bankrupt or whatever, they should be required to post a bond that if those poles are ever to be removed, it would be at the expense. If they can't pay it, then that bond would secure the removal of that facility.
And I can confirm that, again, in our existing language, we do say that if a tower becomes obsolete, that it has to be removed. We do not have any bonding currently attached in that language, but that's something we can explore if the board would like us to do so.
Let me make one more point. Then my concern is if it is in a requirement in our zoning ordinance, though, and they do not have the wherewithal, then it becomes incumbent upon us to pay for the removal, and then we could make some attachment. If it was, and you can correct me any time, Mr. Pope, but if it is in our text that they have to post a bond, then that bond would secure the removal at no expense to the county. Am I right in that assumption, Mr. Pope?
That is correct. However, let me point out that a practical matter may be, I don't know how easy it'll actually be to get a bonding company to write a bond. We're facing that bonding issue right now with regard to another matter the county is dealing with, the ambulance service. And the getting of a bond seems to be somewhat of a problem. I'm not sure if it's market-driven or circumstance-driven, but I think that is a practical issue that somebody ought to answer. I don't know the answer to that, but I suspect that there will be a limited market for these bonds.
I don't imagine there'd be a whole lot of money being made off of it because the expense of moving 60-foot poles is not going to be tremendous.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if they left, and would the county be liable anyway if it's in the homeowner's property, homeowner association? So it would be their liability, it looked to me like.
Yeah.
And if they're willing to accept it, I think it's a moot reason for us to put a bond on.
You know, Mr. Mitchell, I think you and Mr. Pope have enlightened me to the degree that you've alleviated my concern.
Okay.
Okay. I am pretty adamant about the 1.5, though, in the co-location as much as possible. Those are my 2 points. Any other discussion? All right. Not, the floor is open for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, in light of you wanting the 1.5 foot, the action being requested is to approve the proposed text amendment for distributed antenna systems as requested by ATC Outdoor DS LLC, and I think I'll add that little amendment that they put in the ordinance that the setback is 1 1/2 feet.
Okay. Okay. Would you also accept the amendment for co-location?
Yes, co-location be fine too.
And this is just a text amendment to our ordinance.
This would be an amendment to the amended text.
Okay.
As presented.
What about section D? Can we take off that last? It is not subject to any height or setback restriction. Can we delete that line?
In deleting that line, are we going to limit them from being the same height as the current structure in the way that it's worded?
No, what it does is it means that they got to follow the rules about setbacks that you ask questions about. I mean, we're specifying how many feet the setback is going to be, and then we're giving them a get out of jail card so they don't have to comply with it. I'm saying if we really are concerned about how close they are to a property line and how close they are to a structure, then let's not give them a loophole to get out of it. And that's what that section D is. After that comma, that's.
But then it may hinder the movement of this pole to the one antenna that is the source of contention. They are moving it to a flagpole, and by changing this amendment, we may then cause this company to be unable to locate it in the flagpole, which then would address the issues of the homeowners. That's my concern, is that that's fine about the setback, but if it's concealed, there has to be some way for the company to make it as tall as the thing that they're concealing it in without further restriction. Does that make sense?
That's a concern I have in an effort to cover every possible detrimental thing that could happen. You're preventing them from
operating
a path that in most cases would prevent it from being close to a resident.
Right.
And it would be to their advantage to put it on a flagpole if a flagpole exists, or on a steeple if a steeple exists.
And potentially the flagpole is going to be closer than our setback allows.
And, I'm enough a capitalist to realize they're going to do what's in their best interest if it does.
And it sounds like the system has been reconfigured several times to try to address all of these issues. And I understand Mr. Robertson's concern, because what is the definition of concealed? This becomes an objective opinion of whoever is in that position, but there's a lot of regulations that, unfortunately, common sense and somebody's judgment comes into play when making a decision.
And Mr. Chairman,
I'm willing to give the zoning administrator a lot more latitude, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I just don't want somebody to say, hey, we put up a little screen, you're good to go, 60 feet.
But the person who determines if it's concealed is the gentleman standing right there or holding that position, not the company installing the piece of equipment. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I apologize for interrupting your discussion.
No.
I just want to remind you that, to some degree, this is ATC's text amendment as well, and I'm getting feedback that they want to speak to you. So I apologize for interrupting your deliberations, but I believe they have some concerns they want to express over this concealment issue.
And I feel like if we've put a person in a position to manage a department, then we trust their judgment. And if they make decisions that we find out are detrimental to the community, I would hope that we would make decisions in leadership to not allow that person to have that position anymore. So, sorry.
I've been here over 4 weeks.
Right.
I want to get a little bit longer, but no, I respect. I respect your.
Your honey's on the line.
Okay, I mean, again, I mean, when we do these things, we're doing it not, assuming that sometime, I mean, the reason you have building codes is because some people aren't going to build it to a code if you don't make them. Okay, so the reason why we have these rules isn't because we don't trust you, is because history has taught us that if we don't have these guidelines or these requirements, that there will be somebody who does it without taking this approach. So my question to you, Mr. Pope, is that if he says it's not concealed for whatever reason, they want to put up too thin of a flagpole and you think it's going to fall down, for whatever reason, if he says that's not good enough, can somebody come in and say, no, that is concealed and you're being unfair, and now all of a sudden we're in court?
Here goes to the Board of Adjustment.
I think it's possible you could be in court, but it's not very likely.
Okay.
It's going to be a strong burden to show some complete arbitrariness and capriciousness.
Okay, you know what our intent is.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. What about the bond? The issue of the bond? Are we going to?
After listening to Mr. Pope and Mr. Mitchell, they raised enough valid, I'll say, objections, for lack of a better word.
So because it's going to be difficult for the bond to be had.
What good's a bond if you can't buy one?
Can't buy. Is there another route to achieve the same means?
Well, the homeowner association gonna have bonds where I'm studied. Am I correct?
No, these folks, my understanding is the ATC folks have agreed to remove any structure necessary for termination of the facility, whatever.
Mr. Kowski,
Well, can we make that just a requirement then, and remove the part about the bond? Just make it a requirement.
Mr. Kowski, did you not say that there's current language in our code that already addresses that issue, that if a tower becomes obsolete, that this needs to be removed?
Correct.
And that could be added to this?
We can, and it essentially becomes a zoning enforcement issue at that point.
Okay.
With the language we have now.
I'm okay if we'll move that one.
I'm agreeable to that. It may be, the county may be involved a little more than the other way.
That added to the
I'll accept that.
Right.
So is that agreeable to you?
agreeable to me.
Okay, so we have 3 amendments so far?
And then the last one was that the pole, the poles that are used be at least as strong as what the electric utility is using in that area.
I don't have a problem.
They were beyond that.
Okay,
Yep, that's right. They said they were beyond it, but that's them.
That's
and
the
I'm
minimum
worried about,
standard.
Squiggy's,
that's
cell phone service, and he's putting up a broomstick, right?
Okay.
So that's a motion with 4 amendments. You got that,
Right.
Ms. Jean?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad somebody does.
All right, that's the motion with 4 amendments.
Okay.
Everybody's clear on the amendments? Okay. Call the question. All in favor of the motion containing the 4 amendments, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. This time we're going to declare a 5-minute recess. for a parcel of land located at the corner of Brawley School Road and Forest Lake Boulevard. Mr. Roskowski.
Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Chairman. This is an 88.4 acre tract of land, again, being requested to be released for zoning and subdivision jurisdiction of the town of Mooresville. This property is located on the north side of Brawley School Road, south of the intersection with Beech Tree Lane, and north of the intersection with Isle of Pines Road. The property is currently surrounded by residential uses and vacant land. Crescent Resources has stated to us that due to poor soil conditions on this property, development of this property with septic tank systems is likely not favorable. Therefore, the property owner approached the town of Mooresville in March of this year to request an extension of both water and sewer. The town of Mooresville approved that extension, and they also accepted the filing of a petition by the property owner for annexation of this property to be considered at the June 6, 2012 Town of Mooresville meeting. Approval of the release of jurisdiction would ultimately allow the property owner the flexibility to begin working with the town of Mooresville on the development plans for this property prior to annexation. Comparing the allowed densities under the county zoning, approximately 117 homes could be built currently, as compared to 140 to 180 homes under the town of Mooresville jurisdiction. And this again gives access to both water and sewer. Traffic impacts could be up to an additional 1,755 vehicle trips per day. As you well know and are familiar with, Brawley School Road has been widened at this location, and there's also a traffic light at the intersection with Forest Lake Boulevard. Utilizing the school system formulas for calculating new students, staff estimates that an increase of approximately 58 students may be experienced if this tract is developed under the town of Mooresville jurisdiction. So in summary, it appears that this tract is well underway to be considered for annexation by the town of Mooresville in June of next year. Approving a release of jurisdiction at this point would allow the developer to work with the town of Mooresville earlier in the development approval process. Additionally, one fact that we'd like to enter is that the provision of water and sewer services to this particular site appears to potentially lessen environmental impacts that may affect the water quality as well as groundwater supply issues that exist to the Brawley School Peninsula today. Based upon this information, staff supports this request at this time, and I will pause for any questions you may have.
Any questions of Ms. Roskowski? All right, hearing none, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak either in favor or opposition of this matter?
Again, my name is Alan Boyce. This will be very brief. I'm a resident of Brawley School Peninsula. Just some general concerns. We know where this is all going. It's going to be turned over to Mooresville. There's no question about that. But I wanted to make a few points about the community itself. This farms area was developed by Crescent as an intact community, and it included the area that we're talking about here. It's depicted on all their sales brochures. The people that moved into that community believed that this was all going to be part of their community and part of the county. Now we're going to see a sizable portion of it annexed probably, and the county taxes plus the city taxes are going to double for the people who are going to live there. This community has a homeowners association. It is an integral community, again, developed over the years, and now we're going to see a sizable chunk of it depart and go to the city. Along with that, we're going to have a mixture of services, fire, sheriff, Mooresville police, whatever. So I think it's just a disconcerting issue for the people who live there, and again, it probably won't make any difference to anybody here or how it transfers, but again, I think it's something that the folks should consider before they give this away. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir. If you'd come forward and state your name, please.
Good evening. My name is Clayton Brown. I'm the president of the Poplar Grove HOA, which is the gray area you see down in the left-hand corner. Now, I live right up on the last cul-de-sac between my property and School Road. There's a big watershed. I mean, it's deep. Down in the back, behind the residential area, is a big, deep valley. I mean, you're talking 50 to 80 feet deep, and it's a drainage area. Now, they're going to develop this for what reason? They're going to bring water lines, sewer lines. What about the people over off of Beach Street and Bloom? Mooresville going to go after them too, or are they just going to grab this one little chunk because there's a school there? We bought that property 1989, residential. This whole area was just a farm country. Now Mooresville keeps creeping out. What's going to happen to us? 'Cause we're right next door. We next. They're going to say, well, we like this Poplar Grove. It's a nice little community. Not too many homes. They're going to grab us next. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Anyone else?
A question?
Okay.
Is it correct to assume that if this goes over to Mooresville and annexed by Mooresville, it falls under their zoning restrictions and they could rezone this to be multifamily? Is that possible? In which case, it would substantially increase the load up on schools as well as everything else. Does anybody know?
Yes, sir, that's possible. What's going to transpire at some point next June, they're going to be annexed into Mooresville regardless of the action that we take here tonight. If we take action to surrender their zoning jurisdiction, what that allows the developer to do, or the property owner, is to begin to go ahead and work to develop to meet the standards of Mooresville, which he will have to meet anyway. If we don't do this, we simply delay him from now until next June.
Okay, I believe I understand that. I guess the question is, by having it annexed by a city, is it possible to have this particular property then rezoned and have a vast number of more people living there and it cause more load up on the county schools and everything else? Is that an option? Yep. It is.
If pretty much anybody contiguous with Mooresville, if they petition Mooresville for annexation, it's up to Mooresville whether they annex them or not. This gentleman's petitioned for annexation, and he realizes he's going to have to be annexed to get the water and sewer.
Again, it's not contiguous to Mooresville, obviously, though.
Well, it need not be, but...
And the other concern is, of course, I think you've all been part of financing the pipeline and the sewage that's gone down to the school as well as Mooresville has. Crescent hasn't, and they're going to be tapping into that, apparently. Mm-hmm. So basically the taxpayers pay for the infrastructure, as I understand it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay. Okay, anyone else? If not, the public hearing is closed and the floor is open for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say a couple things to be consistent and also to address some of the concerns of the property owners. The town of Mooresville has not engaged in involuntary annexation. It's their policy to do voluntary annexation at the request of the property owner. So as long as you don't ask to be in the town, they will not come and get you, okay? And the General Assembly has been passing legislation to make it harder for towns who do not have that policy, and they do, to involuntarily go and cherry pick neighborhoods to get, just so they can get additional tax base. Second thing is your concern about the runoff and the topography of the region. That is precisely the reason why we passed the erosion control ordinance several years ago. that has plenty of teeth to it, because the state of North Carolina has the same protections, or the law allows for the same protection. They just didn't fund any enforcement for it. So the county has the ability to go in to make sure that the watershed is not damaged and that the lake's not damaged. In the past, my concern about doing anything to allow developments on Brawley School Road, I was concerned about the traffic situation, and now that the road has been widened, if I'm going to be true to my word and consistent in my logic, my objections to allowing people to develop their land on this road are over. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will make the motion. I will make the motion that we will grant this request.
Okay. Motion for approval from Mr. Robertson. Any discussion? No, I haven't. Thank you. At this point, I'll close the public hearing, and Mr. Robertson is ready to make a motion, I believe. Would you state that motion again?
Okay, I'll state it. Approve the release of zoning and subdivision jurisdiction for PIN number 4636-06, 5499 to the town of Mooresville.
Okay. Motion for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion. Okay, excuse me. Motion carries 4-1. Okay, that brings us to administrative matters.
Mr. Chairman, with respect to the relatively late hour, I'm going to give a brief overview, and the representatives that are here can answer any questions that you have, but I've asked them that don't come up unless they need you or you need them. The first request that we have is from the Iredell Statesville Schools. They're requesting $114,094 in excess debt service funds be transferred to annual renovations to pay for the replacement of a failed chiller at Lake Norman Elementary and upgrade system HVAC controls at 4 other schools. This is that 10% that's required to come before the board for approval to be transferred. And Kenny Miller is here, sitting on the front row, if you have any questions.
I hope there are no questions, Mr. Miller. He's already scolded me about keeping him out so late. If not, the floor is open for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Amendment number 7 is a request from the Sheriff's Office to move $5,106 from seized funds to purchase 2 Alienware computers, and these computers would be used by detectives for video enhancement and investigation of digital image evidence. And from what I understand, and Mike Phillips is here to correct me if I'm wrong, that these computers are going to be basically geared specifically to this. It's not just the software, it's the computers as a whole.
Okay. All right, any questions? Floor is open for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Vice Chairman Norman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
David Lambert is here from Solid Waste, and he actually has the next 4 items, so I'm going to let him go ahead and come on up and make those presentations.
I was all set to talk for about 2 hours, but I guess since we've got to the point we are, that I'll try to cut it short. And it is a long drive back to Love Valley, so we'll get on with it. About 1995, the county signed a contract with a landfill gas developer for the energy potential at the Iredell County landfill. That agreement was 20 years, and it's going to expire here in about 4.5 years. The agreement was okay at the time. It provides the county with $6,000 per year. It's pretty open-ended, doesn't set any environmental compliance requirements for that company. They sold their rights to that to DTE a few years back, and they developed the plant that we have now. So with that contract expiring, we feel like there's a lot of value there that the county's not been able to capture, and then we would like to add some things in there that gives us some environmental safeguards. Now, landfill gas is very complicated, and to be honest with you, we just don't have the technical expertise to go out here and write a really good RFP that covers all those bases. So Joyce Engineering is a company that we've had to do some landfill gas work for. They're very qualified, and I'm just here tonight to request that you would allow them to develop an RFP and to evaluate the responses to that so we can go forward with a new contract in the future that's more beneficial to the county.
Okay, any questions?
Just the state of North Carolina has mandated that a certain percentage of our electricity be generated from renewable resources, which means that people like us the utilities are forced to buy it from renewable resource providers regardless of the cost because they're mandated. This will end up in higher utility costs for consumers over time, but Iredell County can be on the receiving end of that money, and that's what this is all about. So instead of us selling off the gas at a low price, people are forced to buy it, and we'll be able to sell to the highest bidder. So get what you can. It helps our taxpayers at the expense of the utility consumers.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Mr. Robertson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
The next thing I have here is a request to extend a contract with Beck Debris Removal, and they're known now as SAIC. So what happened in 2007, we signed a contract with this company to monitor in the event that we ever had a very large natural disaster storm event, that they would monitor the debris removal company. So we went out for RFPs actually at the same time and signed a contract with a management company and a monitoring company. The intent was that both of these contracts would be a 3-year term with 2 annual renewals. Through some sort of error in writing that contract with the monitoring company, it was only written for a 2-year original term with 2 annual renewals. And what we'd like to do is agree to an amendment to that original agreement that allows us 1 more annual renewal, and that'll make both of them concurrent, and then we'll be able to go out for RFP again at the same time and save a lot of headache for the county.
Okay. Any questions? Not, all floors open for a motion.
Motion to approve the amendment.
Motion to approve from Vice Chairman Norman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
The next thing here is approval of the design for the Mooresville Transfer Facility's white goods site, and you're not voting on any money or anything here. That was already approved in 2010, June 2010. So what we want to do now is just look at the design we have here. And this is a little bit blurry, but basically it shows the existing transfer station. And what we want to do is come into the side, take some soil out of the bank, build some retaining walls. You'll see there's about 5 box sites there. And there's a little cement pad for basically a garage-type building. It'll have, enclosed sides that meets the town's approval and everything. And that'll allow us to have 1 box there for the Freon-containing appliances, non-Freon, an overflow box, and we do try to extract some valuable metals too, so that just gives us plenty of space to do that. Town of Mooresville generates right now 46% of all the white goods we take in. And NC Diener has voiced some displeasure with the way we've been handling white goods there, and to avoid eventually a fine, we need to do this, and we feel this will be sufficient for our needs.
And all this will be taken from the existing white goods fund. There'll be no subsidy from your ordinary budget or anything else, right?
And that is correct.
Okay.
And we do have to use that money or risk getting our distributions cut off.
Okay. Any other questions? Floor is open for a motion. Move for approval. Motion for approval from Mr. Mitchell. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And my last one here, about a year ago, Mr. Mashburn asked me to try to interview some companies that could provide solid waste financial planning services for us. And I was headed to a conference at that time, and so I just brought it up to all the engineers that I run into, the ones that I knew, the ones I didn't know. And McGill was the only ones that really made some sense to me. I've got Jeff Bishop from McGill with me tonight. He's Director of Solid Waste Services for them. He's been in solid waste about 24 years. They provide the design and financial modeling for Catawba County, our next door neighbor. So I'm going to let, Jeff's going to do a little short presentation for us, but I guess some of the background, I mean, everybody here is familiar with the issues we had with the town of Mooresville a year ago, pulling out on their agreement to help fund the transfer station in Mooresville. Downturn in the economy certainly has affected us. We're a standalone fund. We depend on our tipping fees. We generate our own money. So it's become more complicated. There's more regulation from the state. There's some things that occasionally you don't see coming down the pike that blindside you, and we have to have a way to fund that. And we've done a good job with it. I think you'll agree with that, but we also recognize the need that we're looking not down the road just 5 years to the next sale. We'll be looking at a point here before so many more years goes by that we'll be closing out some existing sales, and that's going to be very expensive. There's not been many done in North Carolina. It's probably going to be more expensive than we've anticipated. So we feel like we need a little bit of help to get a base model to determine what we want to do in the future and to kind of smooth out those bumps so we don't have a huge fee increase. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you, David. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm going to cut down on my presentation just slightly. I know that
we're liking you already.
I know you probably don't want to hear a lot of the McGill propaganda, so I'm going to pass on some of that. So
tell us what you need to tell us.
Exactly right. So I'm going to get to the heart of the matter here. Basically, as David mentioned, we did come together. I guess that was last SWANA conference back in the fall, and many of our clients are experiencing the same difficulties that y'all are. They're all-encompassing solid waste programs. They may be doing collection, they may be doing disposal, they may be handling recycling. All those facets have been hit by increased regulatory compliance issues, new rules, new regulations. This economy, as funny as it sounds, actually impacts how much waste that we dispose of. And so disposal of waste is equal to revenue for a county that operates a landfill. So you've seen reduction in waste, which is a reduction in the revenue. Recycling prices have just been going all over the place. It's very difficult to plan for a steady revenue stream when you have all these different factors coming in. So one of the things that we have found is the need to develop a financial plan to help stabilize that, as David mentioned, try to even out some of those curves. So what we planned to do here was one. This is kind of a model that we developed and we've used in several different counties in western North Carolina. One is we go through and collect a lot of available past data, historical data, to try to input that into our model. Look at the current annual budget model, evaluate the current fee structure, and basically what we do is try to develop look at the capital improvement plan. And what we're proposing here is to look at a 15-year plan. As David mentioned, a lot of times governments will get into planning maybe just a year or two, 5 years down the road. But we found that it's very important to look out further than that. You've got a lot of big expenses when you talk about building an next cell. Millions of dollars. You could be buying, a new compactor that's $500,000 or $600,000, $700,000. You may have to do new, work at your convenience centers or new work at your transfer stations. If you plan ahead on this and you can put that in a financial plan and a model, we feel like that you can come through and make logical decisions now that when you get to those points, they're not as big a hurdles to jump over. Again, I'm going to rush going through this a little bit, but what we propose is, we have a new capital improvements program. You would see a model that actually identifies projects working with your existing solid waste designer that you've got, or engineer you've got now, to help put those in a capital improvements plan. Identify financial analysis. Where do you stand? Do you have your revenue versus your expenditures? And then any kind of special program, special enterprise funds that you may have, if recycling's a standalone, and I don't think it is. I think that all falls within the solid waste program. But identify any of those special things, and then come up with actually a cash flow. How does it work out? Expenditures versus revenues. Where do we need to be? Do we need to be looking at increased tip fees? Nobody likes to hear that. But sometimes if you can plan ahead, they don't have to have a large tip fee increase, in year 10 or something like that. Maybe you do incremental increases that's a lot easier to put out to the public. Basically what we're doing, the financial model that we would give you is not proprietary. We recommend that you come in and review it every year. Basically, because the more data you can put into it, the easier it is to calibrate, the more accurate it is. Provides a logical basis for decision making, provides y'all with the background data that you need to be able to make decisions, and it provides a strategic planning tool to enhance the program management. So I think you have before us, you have our full presentation here before, and I'd be happy to address any questions that you may have gotten from reviewing that. But we do have a proposal that was submitted back. It's actually submitted back in February, but we're still that's still good, and we'd like to help you out with the financial planning. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Bishop, you and I spoke briefly a few minutes ago before the meeting. One contingency we had this year was the deal with Mooresville and the change of operation as far as related to those, and that's an unexpected bit of a shock to us. Mm-hmm. It impacted the decision on setting our impact fees. In your model, do you incorporate some contingency expense in the out years? Or I guess I'm saying that. Pardon? I'm just saying there was no way for us to see that 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Really, yes. 6 months prior. They just decided they were going to quit paying it. Do you incorporate a contingency into your financial plan such as that?
We would have contingencies built into our capital improvements plan, which is actually fixed projects that you may have. There would be contingencies in there. That type of, I guess it would be in the conservancy of your waste stream. We try not to project that you're going to have a 5% increase in waste stream, because that would be equivalent to your revenue projection. So we're going to be conservative in that approach. Okay. I think where we would tackle a lot of those issues maybe is in our recommendations for potential changes maybe in your ordinance that may say, about waste stream, how your waste stream is how you control your waste stream in the county. We'd have to get into a little more detail on that, but I guess to answer your question specifically, I think we're just being conservative on our waste projections.
Okay. And talk to us a minute about how well you're plugged into the legislature and how well you can make us aware of pending legislation and how that would be incorporated into your financial plan that you would recommend. You have someone on your staff who analyzes the possible impact of legislation forthcoming?
Absolutely. We actually have two folks that we kind of identify with that. One is we have a member of the EMC, the Environmental Management Commission, and he gets wind of a lot of potential changes in rule changes, when that comes down the pipe that they're reviewing, so that helps us a lot. The other is myself. I'm actually a member, I'm on the board of directors for SWANA, which is the Solid Waste Association of North America, and so we get a lot of times we have a standing member from the solid waste section that comes to our meetings and gives us a heads up on things that are coming up. And so through that organization, we are very involved in reviewing and providing opinions on future rules. So yes, is the answer to that. And we would try to incorporate as much of that as possible. If we see a rule change that's going to be 1, 2, 3 years down the road that the county would have to take into account, we would incorporate that into our financial model.
And the last one, probably the most difficult. A change in economic conditions actually swamps anything else that we would consider. I mean, that can mean the difference in tons a day coming into our landfill.
Yes, sir.
Do you incorporate any economic predictions? And I know I'm asking this at a very uncertain time in the economy.
Yeah, and I wish I'd be lying to you if I told you that we could predict what goes on in the future. I mean, we just can't. I mean, you see how the stock market goes up and down every day. Unfortunately, that's the way that the waste stream is. We've got some clients now that are 20 and 25% off on their revenue because their waste stream is down. We've got landfills that we designed that were going to be 5 and 6 years of life that now all of a sudden they've got 10, 12 years of life in that landfill. So I wish I could say that I was good at projecting that. We do our best, just in the fact that we don't in our financial model we don't try to project high revenues. 1, 2, 3, 4%. When we see over the last 2 to 3 years, we've basically seen absolutely flat disposal. Back in 2008, we saw the big drop, but since then, in 2009 on, we've basically seen a flat disposal rate. And so I think for the next couple of years, we would not show any kind of projected increase in disposal rate.
So the best assurance you could give us, and again, not trying to be difficult, is that you would
understand. I'd love to be able to answer that question for you.
You would budget conservatively, and then anything above that, you'd advise us just to stash that away because we may need it.
Is that correct? Because it's going to impact as I talked about the capital improvement plan, when you want to develop your next cell, it's going to impact that. So that would come into play also when we have to have that expenditure for the next cell.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other questions? If not, the floor is open for a motion. I'm going to offer a motion that we approve this. I had an opportunity. I had some concerns I expressed from Mr. Smith prior to the meeting, but talking to Mr. Bishop earlier and subsequent in this meeting, I'm satisfied it'd be of benefit to us in regard to the cost. I offer that motion for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Not all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Memo 13 is from the Health Department, and David Henson is here in case we have any questions. The Environmental Health Division is basically asking for a budget amendment to move $16,000 from salary and fringe to contracted services. This is based on the resignation of a clerk in the Mooresville office that was funded half and half, partly from environmental health, partly from clinical. And clinical is not going to be funding their portion of this employee. So they're going to take the short term and evaluate the position overall and fill it with a temp if they get the budget amendment. And David can add to this if he'd like, but one of the reasons is that we are in the process of looking at the way we deliver service from environmental health inspections, planning, and looking at ways that maybe we can revamp that whole process. I think that plays into this somewhat, and looking at how that process kind of plays out.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Henson? If not, the floor is open for a motion.
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Motion for approval from Mr. Mitchell. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And the final item under administrative matters is request for approval of the September 20th, 2011 minutes.
Motion to approve. Motion for approval of the minutes from Vice Chairman Norman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to announcements of vacancies occurring on boards and commissions. The first is the Local Emergency Planning Committee. One announcement. Facilities Task Force for Schools, that's 6 announcements. We're going to have 4 from the community and 2 elected officials. And that brings us to appointments to boards and commissions. The Personnel Advisory Committee.
I'd like to nominate Mr. John Green.
Okay, Mr. John Green's been nominated by Mr. Mitchell. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I move we close the floor for nominations. Appoint Mr. Green by acclamation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we'll still have 1 vacancy there. Madam Clerk, that will appear on the next agenda, I assume.
I'll go ahead and make it for Don Searcy.
I believe he's ineligible, isn't he?
He's ineligible. Oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
My mistake.
Yes, sir. If you want it on the next agenda, or I can put it on the reminder list.
Let's put it on the next agenda, if we would. Need to go ahead and never know when Mr. Smith might need some help. Okay, any unfinished business? Public comment period? New business?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the county manager something.
Yes, sir.
I had a strange thing happen to me today. I was going to town to eat lunch, called my neighbor, and he fussed about an illegal junkyard up in North Iredell. And I said, yeah, I've seen it. I was eating lunch with one of the deputies. He said he had a complaint from it from a girl that works in the DA's office about the noise over there, and he's been up there and talked to him. While I was sitting there eating, one of the other neighbors called me, said, what's going on up there? And I said, I don't know, I'll find out. But I went back by there, and I counted 12 cars in this yard backed up to the interstate. The road out in front of that house is nothing but black skid marks where they've been spinning out. And I need somebody to go up there at 197 Josie Road. It's got a Statesville address, and see what's going on in that rental house up there. If you don't mind. How many cars are they allowed to put in a yard before it's considered?
Generally speaking, 6.
6? God. If you'll take care of that, I appreciate it, and a lot of neighbors would up there.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, I'm almost a junkyard, but all mine got tags.
Yeah, they got to be untagged.
Okay.
Okay, county manager's report.
One thing, I should have brought this up under the announcements. One thing that Dr. Miller mentioned about the Facilities Task Force is that what they're hoping to get under the 4 community announcements is representation on a north, south, east, west, if possible. Other than that, I gave you 2 handouts of events that are going to be taking place that you may be interested in. The first one is on October 15th. That's a Saturday at the Troutman Depot, and that's this one. It's basically a dedication for the Catawba Carolina Thread Trail and the Lake Norman Bike Route. So they're doing kind of a joint event. The second is it's a notice of a joint informational meeting. And this is Cornelius Road has been one of those corridors that's been real busy from a planning perspective over the last few years, and with the ballpark and some plans for the connection between Mazeppa and Cornelius Road, there's some real need to be looking at that corridor in depth. So we're going to be holding at the suggestion of Commissioner Johnson a joint planning meeting, basically just to gather input with the town of Mooresville from the residents in the area. And basically, this is a small keep it to the frontage of Cornelius Road area that's kind of bookended by 21 and I-77. Yeah, not all the way over to Perth yet.
Okay.
Try and keep it, start there and see where it goes, basically. But again, this is basically asking them for their input at this point, not trying to shove anything down their throat.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We have no closed session that I'm aware of this evening, so I offer a motion, we adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously. Boy, it's a long